think we're all here, so maybe we should start because it's be timely, prompt. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. And the first order of business is approving the minutes from last meeting.
I move that the minutes be approved as written.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, abstain, okay. So, okay, next agenda item is public comment, and this is for persons desiring to address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda. Is anybody interested? Okay, so I'm gonna then, seeing no hands, I'm gonna move along to announcements from Shelley.
Okay, the first announcement is the item that's on the screen. It is a new event for the City of Albany, and it's being organized by Supervisor Eva Phelan. It's a great event. It's giving girls exposure to a variety of sports. There'll be about 20 to 25 organizations there doing demonstrations of various sports. There is steer roping to skateboarding and baseball and softball and all the other usual, and track and lacrosse. So it's going to be a great day. The information's up on the board. Stop by. There'll be food trucks and an incredible raffle. Actually, all the organizations have donated things, so people will be entered in the raffle. So we're excited about it. I should say happy Bike to Work Day. Today is, May is Bike Month, and the Recreation Department has a lot of bike events going on in addition to the Bicycle Rodeo that's sponsored by PAL organization. And May is also Older Americans Month, so the Senior Center has a number of events going on at the Senior Center as well. One last announcement for you. Friends of Albany Parks, we had the Memorial Park cleanup on May 5th, and, we had a few pictures. So we dumped a huge pile of, this is the 5-bar that goes into the playground. The surfacing was about 35 wheelbarrows full, and we had a great crew, lots of trimming. And I also wanted to thank Doug Donaldson for taking pictures during the day. If you guys are on Facebook, we post those on Facebook. These are a few of them. And also thank the Community Foundation for Pizza. And those are all the announcements I have for you.
Okay, thanks. Next item is 5-1 Albany Hill Access and Trails Project Update by Robert Gonzalez, City of Albany Capital Project Manager. Thanks.
Good evening. The project is the Albany Hill Access improvements, and it's been on our capital improvement program list for quite some time. It's funded by Measure R, and if I'm not mistaken, this might be the first time this body is seeing this project or these diagrams. Is that correct? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go through those and give you an update on where the project is now and where we're going from forward from here. RDG prepared the packet that's in front of you, the Restoration Design Group. They're out of Berkeley, I believe. And they prepared this packet about a year ago, and it was presented to council. And this is essentially the preliminary design phase. The purpose of the project is to improve Albany access, and that begins with improved parking, and that also includes a lot of really thorough trail improvements. So we're going to do a soft touch, but it's going to be extensive throughout the trail system in the park. And then there'll be spot areas where they go in and do some focused improvements where you can see there's some challenging parts to the trail system that just a few little light touches here and there will really improve things. So RDG prepared this packet. It was shown to the board, and essentially our questions to the council last year was, would you like us to proceed, or is there feedback that you'd like to provide us now? So at this point, council asked us to proceed forward. We included in the capital improvement program. We brought RDG back after we asked for proposals. They provided us a proposal to you in phases so you could see how the project is progressing into the design phase and the drawings. So right now we would call this about a 10% development stage. By June, I would like to bring this back to you and be in the 60%, 65% stage. And by July, before you guys go on summer recess, I'd like this to be very close to 100%, so you guys feel comfortable approving it or recommending it for approval. And then in September, we can go to council and get that approval. From there, I would be hiring the contractor to perform the work. The work performance has some restrictions in terms of bird nesting and some other restrictions, so we want to make sure we're on a really reasonable timeline. So this is an aerial of the hill. You've got Jackson Street basically right dead in the middle. Just below that, towards the bottom third of the screen, is Taft. So you've got a couple different access points, but I'm going to start on Madison, which is on the far right of your screen. Actually, I'll back up and start with the overview. The yellow portions that you see are existing trails. The orange portions are proposed trails. So this is conceptual, so we haven't staked anything out and this isn't finalized. But the purpose of the meandering trail is to essentially cut through some of the more challenging slopes. So instead of going straight up to the summit for ADA requirements and to smooth off some of these grades, we're just going to meander the trail back and forth a little bit. So it's going to be really nice. And then there'll be some ADA parking and at the Taft entrance. So from Taft going up the hill, there'll be some meandering, and then from Taft going down the hill towards Jackson, there'll also be some meandering. This is going to require some tree removals. So that'll be part of the package, is when we do the site work with RDG, we'll be identifying trees proposed for removal. So a lot of those are going to be eucalyptus. That's just kind of the predominant forest blend that we have in this area. And then there's going to be some soft stuff. So you guys are already flipping through the packet, so we'll go ahead and start there. So you guys are familiar with the Taft steps. The Taft steps, as they are now, impinge a little bit on private property, I believe. It can use some improvement. So this is one conceptual rendering of the Taft entrance onto the hill. So it's kind of a nice little rendering where you have a bulb cut out, and then it's in an introduction to the hill. On the left-hand side, you can see that there's some toyon grove. So there's an existing grove of plants that we want to protect. On the right-hand side, it shows that there's also some toyons on that side as well. So the alignment hasn't been finalized. These are just one potential alignment, but there are restrictions in this particular area about how we're going to approach this. It's shown here as concrete stairs and steps. That's not a final design element. I took RDG out there last month. Timber would work. Recycled materials would work. Concrete would also work. But that's a detail we haven't landed on yet. It's actually a very nice area that we could do timbers reasonably well and have a couple of cutbacks to get onto the hill. This is another look of the same steps. So this is the turnaround at the top of Taft. ADA parking and a crosswalk are going to be key features for us to make sure that we get into the design. There's also some entryways where we're going to basically soften the entryway, so we have some nice little landings, some areas where people could actually step out of their car, step onto the curve, and have kind of a rock, gravelly area where you could actually just kind of stage there before you actually decide which direction you're going to go into. We're showing here that we have some timbers that are laid down. These are eucalyptus logs that, as proceed through the project, we'll be taking down some trees, and we're going to be looking to recycle those trees and use them on site as best we can. We've had some conversation with the fire department. Fire department's interest is very clear. They have one interest, and that's to remove fuel from the forest. So we'll be working with them to make sure we're meeting their needs as well. We're going to be recycling some of those, but also helping them and remove some of that fuel. But this is essentially, I would say that this is very close to like a 20 or 30% drawing already. You've got good scale to it. It's got some nice design features. We'll be coming back to this group, but I don't expect this particular area to change a whole bunch. It's already really nice. This is another look at Taft. You can see the existing bar gate there, and then just off to the right of the bar gate, you've got a trailhead signage, and then the ADA route. So the ADA route is going to be ADA compliant, and that's going to be the one that's going to round about and then end up in the summit, but it's going to be kind of a longer way around. So you'll have some choices as you enjoy the hill. And then you've got steps down to the Jackson Trail. Just a kind of an example of how we might lay down some logs on the trail. I think the trail is going to ultimately be widened so that we have room to kind of stop and enjoy the scenery. Oops, sorry about that. So this is the Jackson turnaround. There's a lot of good improvements here. Right now, there's really not a lot of improvements at that end of the street. So essentially, we're going to make the hill more inviting at this point. It's going to be a nice entryway. It's not, we don't have to bring in a lot of materials to make it that way. We could reuse the logs that we're going to be taking down. And then we'll have some improvements to the steps. I think I've got a detail on some of these steps further on. There's another look at Jackson Street. And there's one of the details of the steps. So we've seen these before. They're things that you might see in a regional park. So it's a nice, soft integration into the landscape. Yeah, there we go. So this is Madison. Right now, if you're at the end of Madison, you probably went the wrong way because it's just a dead end. But there's a big, giant guardrail there. If you've been to the end of Madison, it's essentially a big rail that you would stop. Somebody going at 40 miles an hour. RDG proposed that we soften that entrance, and we just put some wooden bollards in there in replace of the guardrail. On the right side of this rendering, there's actually a single-family home that's pretty close. So there needs to be some softening in terms of making sure that we respect their need for access to their house and backing up and that sort of thing. So maybe some striping on the ground to introduce the kind of a transition between paved street and public right-of-way and a trail. If you go out there now, it looks a little bit different because our maintenance crews did some improvements on in drainage, so we'll be working around these improvements, but it'll look similar to this. So there's another look. Did I skip one?
You skipped a few.
Oh dear. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So this is a detail of some of the areas. This is specifically on the reach between Madison and Jackson. There's a couple of little creek crossings that you can cross. You're able to, but it's nicer for people if they have a little wooden plank to go across. Just 2 or 3 timbers. And a little swale enhancement here. There's some localized areas where there's there's some erosion, so this is a nice way to kind of protect a natural feature that we already have. And there's an aerial of Madison, so you can see the residential driveway that I pointed out before. Let's see if I could find this. This area. I can't stay up there. So there's a. You can see that there's the bollards at the end of the street, and then there's a pole. That's like a telephone pole. It's an existing feature there. That'll be kind of a definite endpoint to the improvements. I don't see a need, if we're going to put in the bollards, there's not necessarily a need to do a lot of the regrading on the right-hand side. But that'll be a design feature that we bring back to you guys later on. This is going to look different because the improvements that our maintenance crews changed the way the water flows in this location. So this won't look the same. There's Madison. Okay, I think that's the last one. So from here, I'm working with RDG now to take these drawings, and they're working in the field. They've got a survey crew that they've just finished doing some survey work so they could lay out some elevations, and we'll be doing some work to essentially develop a 60% set to bring back to you guys in June. But this is really an invitation to either answer your questions or get feedback. Certainly, I'm open to feedback, not just tonight, but in going forward from here. But if there's any questions or anything you guys want to add to what you saw.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have some questions. So thanks first. This is really interesting. Did RDG do any assessments of the eucalyptus for where the monarchs overwinter? And will the tree removal take into consideration where they are and what other needs they have in terms of
habitat.
Because I know that they've been petitioned for endangered species
Right.
listing, and I think the 90-day finding is either this fall or spring, and that might coincide with when you guys are actually doing this work if they are listed. So I just wanted to make sure that they were taken into account.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So the city has a consultant on board now, independent of what our RDG is doing. We commissioned a study. The study isn't completed yet, but we can certainly bring those findings to you guys when it is complete. I forgot the name of the group, the consultant. Creekside Science went out there. They did a habitat assessment. They've identified what they consider existing habitat, which is primarily off of city property. But part of the design is we're going to bring Creekside in to the RDG design group, and as we're removing trees, we're going to provide one is to make sure that we have any habitat that we need to protect, and then two, as we're removing trees, can we somehow enhance habitat for the hill? So that'll be something that we want to do, regardless of their status. That's something that we want to do. And on top of that, let me just add that we also have some native plants on the property. So we're going to be identifying those and staking those out so that when we're staking out the trail, we'll have an idea of where the native plants are, where we may want to reintroduce native plants. There's a lot of blackberry, which just is invasive. So as we're taking some of that out, we can reintroduce some native plants. It's really supposed to be an access improvement project, but all of these things kind of come in with that scope.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment that I am very excited about this. I think this makes Albany Hill a lot more accessible to a wider range of people and easier to be appreciated. I did have one question because, forgive me if this has been covered in a previous meeting before I joined the commission, but all of these access points I note are from the east side. Is there any effort or any part of this project that will look at access from Pierce Street up the hill the other side?
So I didn't bring a property boundary map with us, but the city doesn't own the entire hill. So I think what maybe we'll do is at the 60% stage when we come back, I'll bring that property map so we can see there really isn't a lot of opportunities for access without actually talking to one of the property owners about access. So I think that's, for now, the trail map that we see is the one we're going to live with.
Thank you. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
I wanted to second that. I think it looks really great. I live near the base of Albany Hill on the east side, and my family walks in at the Madison entrance a lot. And I took my dog through there and hiked the trail up to the top yesterday to kind of refresh my memory on how things look. And I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of these improvements. I had a few questions. One was on the overview map, it says swing, and my family has always enjoyed the makeshift swings that people put up there and the city takes down. Is that label just recognizing where people often put swings, or is there going to be an actual city-sponsored legit swing there?
At this point, there is not a city-sponsored legit swing there. Nor is there a city-approved swing there. If the Parks and Rec Commission wants to speak on that, they certainly can, but that is not part of my project, sorry.
Okay, so that's just labeling the existing
Correct.
temporary whatever location.
Shift, yeah,
Okay.
whatever adjective you want to use.
And then for removing trees, I also had the similar concerns about the monarchs, but I also wanted to try to make sure, it says at a few points on the ADA path, viewpoint pullout. Wanted to see if trees can strategically be removed to really improve the view, because as I was reminded walking up there yesterday, at least from the ridge line, you can't hardly see anything of the bay or the mud flats or the skyline or anything. You can sort of see the Golden Gate Bridge a little bit near where the swing is, but that's about it. And I think you get a lot of people up there enjoying the nature and really enjoying the view.
Right.
If just a few trees could be removed in strategic places. And so has any of that been, is that part of the plan, do you know?
So I mentioned meetings with the fire department. So that's their drive is any opportunities that they see, they'd like that removed. So Measure R is our funding source. Measure R was specifically called upon because it identifies Albany Hill and improvements to that as a key improvement. So we're expecting that the improvements that we've already mapped out here is going to be in the $900,000 to $1 million range. As we get through design, we're going to be able to kind of narrow that down. If we have additional funding available within Measure R, we can make additional improvements to the hill, which might include tree removal. If you look at the Albany Hill Master Plan, tree removal is an aspect of that as well. So we're not inconsistent with that at all. We certainly can identify trees and remove trees to improve either habitat or views. We just have to be thinking about both of those. When one of the things that I forgot to mention, Creekside is the one that's doing the monarch study. Part of their contract is to take us on a walk and kind of walk us through current habitat and really kind of give us kind of a schooling on what monarchs need and how they thrive and what they need in their habitats. So they need protection from wind and they need a certain amount of sun. And this guy's an expert on exactly how that works and if you take down a tree and what does the canopy look like before and after and kind of walking us through some of that. So we can certainly communicate to you guys when that's going to happen. So that'll be one of the aspects that we're communicating. Does it make sense to take down the tree for the purpose of the trail? And then on top of that, are we opening up canopy for monarchs? And then beyond that, can we go further and take down some trees to improve views? So I think all of those can be consistent. We just want to make sure that, one, I don't run out of money, and two, all of those things are I guess, criteria.
I'm not clear, though, if we did want, I don't know what, that's a question for Shelley, about what purview we would have over a recommendation like that, but where in the process would that be, that we, that you might be able to circle back to us about that?
So I'm hoping between now and June, RDG will be out there on site staking out proposed
Okay.
layouts for the trail. So that'll be the beginning of the process of evaluating which trees need to come down, tagging the trees, and then evaluating with Creekside, how does that affect monarch? I'm going to call it potential habitat, because none of the trail areas actually are current habitat for monarchs. Does that help? So between now
That helps if we just, it would be great to know, and if you feel have that information in June, if that's even a possibility. Yeah,
That's my target, yes.
great, wonderful. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. Can you indicate on the map, I see concrete pavement. Are all the trails intended to be concrete pavement? I assume not. Could you indicate which ones would be concrete?
At this point, we haven't decided on any materials. So that was
So maybe it's just a,
that was a follow-up question that was kind of a stumbling point when we went to council, and RDG kind of, they explained it as like they put this together
understood,
as
understood.
as an example. But they're gonna take our lead, and we told
I just
them-
wonder if it was ADA requirement or something, that certain percentage.
I don't think so. No, I think you can make ADA requirements without using
It's
concrete.
a matter of maintenance. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And then the trail on the north part of the hill is never going to be ADA. I hiked that, and it's very, very narrow, very steep, and yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So in the little bulbs, we're really looking at Taft to the summit as the areas where we can make it ADA compliant. We can make improvements to the other ones to make it more accessible, but really Taft to the summit is where you can make it, the slopes flatten out enough.
I have two questions. They're short. The first is, when you come back in June, will you have more information about how you'll be decommissioning the existing trails?
I can have RDG kind of work on that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
I'm
good idea.
curious about those plans. And then the other is just for the signage. Are those mostly going to be maps, or will there be interpretive signs as well?
We haven't landed on that yet. I mean, and we're welcome to feedback. Some people like tiny signs, like just wayfinding, and then other folks really like a lot of good information. If you like QR codes, you can tell me that too. But for the most part, we haven't really landed on whether we want, a really big presentation on signage or just a smaller one.
We've heard some great presentations about the native plants efforts on Albany Hill. So although I'm mostly a fan of signage that involves wayfinding and trail mapping, I would actually welcome at least one of the signs somewhere to sort of talk a little bit about that for people that, like myself, have learned about that as a part of this commission and maybe would enjoy knowing what they're seeing.
And monarchs. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
I had a question about signage. I had a question about signage too. But first I wanted to say that this is super exciting. I really appreciate this presentation, and thank you for these drawings. They're wonderful. But the signage, my question is more about timing, because I know that we as a commission have talked about the city having some consistent signage. And so I was just wondering when if the next time you come to us, you could talk about when we would need to give you decisions about signage and when you thought the signage would be installed, so we as a commission could address whatever those signage issues were. I don't exactly remember what they were.
Yeah, we can certainly bring that back to you. So just to give you an idea of where that would go, signage would be probably one of the things that we would fill in between 60 and 90%. And in terms of construction, the fall will be the opportunity we have to actually bring down the trees first. So the trees need to come down first to lay in the trail. And then the signage would be one of the last elements that we do in the construction phase. But it's really one of the last elements that we really look at in the design phase too. And RDG is going to be looking to us to give them a theme or color montage. So I'll be working with Shelley on that.
And you mentioned if all goes according to plans, this would go to the council potentially in September. When would we expect that we can be tramping around on these beautiful trails, ideally, or in your hope?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I don't have answers to yet is nesting. Nesting typically, you do a nesting survey just prior to construction. Ideally, I can do a nesting survey this spring, which would give us some information about next spring. But a nesting period might be from, say, January to March, January to April, depending on the species. So that would be a construction restriction for some of the work, maybe not necessarily all of it. Some of these birds might need a radius around their nest. So if I can get to council and get drawings approved, then trees would be removed in the fall time. Winter is probably a lousy time to work up on the hill, so construction would begin again in the spring. Maybe piecemeal, or portions of the site can be done in the springtime, and then the remainder of the trail work can be done after the nesting season. So we're probably looking at next summer for trampsing.
I had one other question on Cerrito Creek at the northern part of the map there. If you go past the colored trails, the dashed lines and everything, a little bit past that, there's a well-beaten path down to the creek, and then people, including my family, many times have tried to cross the creek standing on rocks and getting across to the playground on the other side and Ranch 99. And
Right.
Is there any talk of doing some kind of bridge there?
There has been talk about doing a bridge. The location that at least was indicated prior to this was further west, getting closer to Pierce Street. But yes, there's been discussion about that. The challenge there is really, it's man-made, it's a property issue. Cerrito Creek is primarily in El Cerrito, and the city boundary is kind of hugs the southern boundary of Cerrito Creek. So it's really a communication effort of us engaging with El Cerrito about us building a bridge on essentially what amounts to Contra Costa County and the city of El Cerrito.
So if it's mostly on their property, they would pay for most of it, right?
I don't know if I can answer that.
You're new on this commission, aren't you?
I would really like for them to participate in cost sharing, both in the capital cost and in the continuing maintenance. And that's really what the discussion is going to be about: is how much is this going to cost both cities, and who's going to maintain it? How are we going to do that? Is it a joint agreement between the two of us? Do we swap paint brushes? That's really what it's going to come down to. So in terms of getting the projects done, the trails will come first. It'll be a separate contract to do the trails. And if we do agree on placement and style of a future bridge, that can still be done with Measure R funds. It'll simply be another contractor that does that. It might be just a prefabricated bridge. The engineering won't be the hard part. It'll be who pays for what.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So we'll see you in.
Public comment.
Oh, sorry, there's a public comment. That was information. Thank you. So if any members of the public would like to come make comment on this item? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll move on. Thank you so much.
No,
Oh,
so
bring it back?
I held off my comment because we had
Oh,
questions
thank
before. So
you.
now it's time for I just had one comment, very small comment. I would really like to see trash cans on the drawings. Trash is a real problem up there, and I know the trash cans are overflowed, so I would like to see that included on the drawings.
Yes,
I'm done, that's it.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So next item is, actually, we're going to skip 5.2 because that's going to be postponed to a different meeting. So we're going to go straight to 5.3, which is street removal application for one camphor tree at 1225 Marin Avenue.
This was 28, 20.
Okay, we have a camphor tree on 1225 Marin Avenue that is in pretty bad shape. I discovered the tree, well, I've seen it, I've driven by it many times and never acted on it, but we had a call from one of the neighbors about limbs coming down that tree, the tree next to it, and there's 3 other camphor trees leading up to the community center, to the corner of Evelyn and Marin. And the other trees, we're going to get the dead wood pruned out of it, try to perk them up a little bit. This tree, there's not much hope for the tree. It's been in this condition for many years. I looked at Google Street View, and you can go back many years and see that it's been almost this bad, but it's less and less, leaves every year. A few dozen, there were maybe a couple dozen more last year, and so on. So, lots of dead wood in the tree. There is a street lamp that was installed as part of the Marin project, Marin Street project. And that may or may not affect the tree. Like I said, the tree was in decline for a long time before this pole was, before the project even started on Marin. So, but that affects replanting the tree. And of course, we don't replant camphor trees, so we would need a different species anyway. There's a large wound on the tree, just one of the aspects of this tree's poor health. There's also, you can see dead epicormic sprouting on the tree, so it's beyond the point where it's trying to revive itself by sprouting out along the trunk. Even that part of the tree is dying back. So this is a tree. It's in bad shape. It needs to come out, I believe. And I'm proposing we replace it with an arbutus tree. I think that would be a nice tree. There's a couple more up on the other side of Community Center by the BART track on either side of the street. So that would be probably more suitable with the street light there too.
Thanks. Any questions?
Does the arbutus, am I saying that right? Arbutus tree grow to a similar height?
It does in some cases, but it takes a long time, and there's some restrictions there with the street lamp installation, and it's generally kind of a thinner, lighter tree, even though it has larger leaves, but it's not a thick, dense tree like a camphor was at some point.
Just had a question. You were saying some of the trees leading up to it were potentially not doing so well. Is that,
There,
is that
you
right?
can see, you can see in this picture, there's typical of camphors all over the city. There's a lot of dead wood in the tops, and we're just going to get that pruned out. But
Oh, good. So pruning it might help.
Yeah, we'll
Longevity.
see, but they'll
Okay.
look good for a while. At least.
Okay.
Have some time.
Any other questions? Okay, questions from the public? Opening it up to the public for any comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to commission for comments and discussion.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I think this is pretty cut and dry, no pun intended. I move that we approve the tree removal
Okay,
for this application.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Just
So-
one comment, John. I don't know, we're not talking about Peralta, but I noticed a tree that looked a lot like this on the corner of Peralta and Sonoma. If you haven't noticed that, you might take a look.
I have, and
may have noticed
I spoke, it's not quite as bad as this tree,
Yeah.
and I've communicated with the property owner and haven't got a response.
Just wanted to mention it. Yeah.
Okay, so the next item is to discuss possible action items on matter, oh, sorry, I'm reading something else. Discuss process for researching possible options for a dog park in Albany. Shelley, do you want to give some background on that one?
Yes. As you recall, we had this item before us to request that our work plan be amended to include this discussion with the community about if what is a good spot for a dog park, where would that be, and analyze that situation and engage the community in that discussion and prepare a recommendation that would go to council. And so that is what the item is about. The item tonight is not necessarily to get into the details, maybe either talking about Section B or talking about which spots might be great places for a dog park. But tonight is to talk about the formation of a subcommittee made up of up to 3 members of the commission, and then to talk through that, how you want to make that process go, and maybe discuss that initial first meeting of maybe just the subcommittee members, getting a handle, a lay of the land of the different topics and things you want to cover and the scope. And so that's what the item is on the agenda for tonight. So what I did in discussion, so there's a couple of items that sorry. You'll be deciding on if there are people who would be interested in being on that subcommittee, and then I just throw this up here just to get the discussion moving in terms of talking about the subcommittee. I know there'll be, that what may come up is that we had this very old dog ad hoc committee at one point that started back in, I think it was 1997 or 2001. I'm developing a timeline of a bunch of different things that I'll share with the subcommittee and you to kind of put it all together. But there's only one remaining person that is still around. John is still willing to be involved, and he should be engaged as a historical perspective on what has taken place. He can add to that. And it's probably best that the subcommittee be made up of Parks and Rec commissioners, that you guys lead those meetings and then engage him in those conversations as well. So I'll leave this to Julia to kind of lead us through, or if you want me to as well. We can read through these items, or if you want to start with.
You could, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, sure. So some of the things on here for the members of the committee that would be on that subcommittee, ideas for a kickoff meeting that would be just of the subcommittee members. So reviewing just the background information of Section B, that is the current area where dogs are allowed to run off-leash. Review just what are the current off-leash areas, what are nearby dog parks, just getting a lay of the land for where we are in the bigger picture in the region. Identify and engage the stakeholders, so those are neighbors and Section B users and park users and staff, and kind of get information from them so you can get a good picture of what's been going on to date. Then we want to include that last remaining member of the dog ad hoc committee. He has been involved in 17 years probably of random meetings along the way, and a lot of meetings that were community meetings, working up some of those rule signs that came through the commission and went to council, the hours of operation, kind of that part of the history of Section B. Develop a timeline, so how do you want to schedule the meetings? Do you want to have small group meetings? You could have small group meetings with neighbors or Section B users, or how do you want to handle that process in this meeting? Really clarify what the scope of the subcommittee, what we're going to try to do, what is the desired outcome of the meetings, and then what we be delivering back to the commission, and then that would eventually go to the council. And then work on developing a community outreach plan. So how are we going to engage and reach out to the various groups and get them involved in this process? Because that's really what this is to address things that have happened at Section B, but also say, well, let's look at Section B. Let's look at, are there other spots? Let's just go through everything and put everything on the table and hear what people's concerns are and give them a chance to voice their feelings and ideas and comments about the idea of having a dog area in Albany, which I don't know if we've really had that in terms of talking about it being a dog park. That is very specific and exclusive use of just dogs. And so this is open for discussion, or things that I can add to this list that we would give to the subcommittee for their first meeting.
Great. Yeah, and I think what I was hoping for us to talk about, even though this is going to be the sort of task of the subcommittee, but I think as a commission, we could maybe weigh in on what we would hope the subcommittee might be able to do, some of the points to, or some of these strategies to make sure that the stakeholders are involved and that we feel like the outreach plan is comprehensive and all that. So I guess I'm wondering, for process, do we just ask questions at this point and then we do public comment and then we bring it, or can we discuss and then do public comment? Is that the idea?
I think you can kind of mix it.
Okay.
And we can make sure public comment is included as well.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions or comments about this right now? Mhm.
I would just add to this, as I go around walking and see different parks and usages, I was curious if we have any census information about current dog usage in various dog area parks or not.
Okay. Good question. These are my questions I didn't get to this slide, but I started making a list of questions for you guys to just consider and add to and take off. But yes, that is a great question.
I think one of the big questions for me is the other potential options, because I know we're very limited in space. And what I would strongly, strongly urge, I mean, I'll be, putting my hand up to be part of the subcommittee, but is for the subcommittee members to really do a walk through those areas, to just feel it and smell it and sense how other sites might be appropriate or not for a dog park.
Yeah, before I walked all the parks a couple months ago and have been talking to people about dog park issues, and it's interesting to hear some of the parks that are on the other side of town that I don't visit very much, how much they are used for dogs, even though they're not an official dog park. And so those things, certainly with community input, I think we can hear some about that, and people with experience from the commission can bring that to the table. And yeah, space is limited. I've been measuring the dimensions along Key Route of the greenway there and how that would look if that was a dog park. So I think everything's on the table, including keeping, what do you call that, B?
Section B.
Section B.
I have a question. Maybe this is just because I'm new to the commission, but would having a dog park potentially down the line affect the off-leash friendly rules that are in all the other parks? Like, would people then ever want to say this should only be a dog park and then we shouldn't allow dogs off-leash in existing parks?
Not necessarily. That's up for the commission. Those are discussions. That rule change, I meant to look it up because we used to have a leash law and then it changed at a certain date. So I'll go back to my timeline when we changed that ordinance where you have to remain in command. So not necessarily, because there are a lot of people, and there's a difference, dogs who probably need to use a dog park may have accessibility problems, they don't have recall, so that if you let them off a leash, they just take off, and they can't be under command, but they still need to have exercise and run. And same with the owner as well, may not be able to do as much walking or playing at the park. So there are benefits to both sides of having off-leash and within command in parks. You'll see that a lot. Terrace Park is a big area where it's a lot of ball throwing.
I just have a question about that. Would Parks and Rec actually have any influence over the dog rule, or is that a city council?
You can make a recommendation to city
I would make a
council.
recommendation, okay.
Yeah, Terrace Park's a big one, a lot of dog use there, I understand, although I don't live near it. And then my understanding is the Albany bulb, which I don't know how much control we have over that, whose jurisdiction it is these days, but I was surprised to find out that there was some sign somewhere that said it was only dogs on leash were allowed.
Well, I was there last evening, and there were 1 million dogs off leash and lots of dog pooper bags, which I saw, like it looked like it is set up to be a dog park, and people were really enjoying it. I mean, people and dogs were really enjoying it. So that was actually news to me. I didn't realize how well utilized it was by dogs.
Oh, yeah, I go there yeah. So if those got clamped down on Terrace Park and Albany bulb, that would be a big problem, I think.
Commissioner Pearson, did you?
Thank you. So, 2 questions. So one, we talked about dog licensing as a way to raise money for enforcement, because I think so licensing of dogs and enforcement are 2 issues I think that come up with the dog park. I mean, maybe not licensing, but some way to, register your dog if it's an Albany dog as a way to get some funds for some of the programming.
We do have that, so you are supposed to. Yeah.
I don't have a dog.
You are supposed
And use Section B, it's supposed to be licensed.
Oh, okay,
One
so,
of the rules is.
yeah, so then the enforcement,
Not sure how
I guess
well
I'm, then enforcement
Now, we
question.
contract out with Berkeley, and they provide the animal control for the city of Albany. So I've talked to the city treasurer. The numbers are kind of low on people actually following through on their dog license, but there's, don't tell people.
I
Don't.
do. No, I do.
Now we're going to start our enforcement tonight.
I do license. I do license. I'm one
You
of the.
did, okay.
I do license.
Yes, yes. So,
Always the
if there are
assumption.
questions that pop up out of the subcommittee or from the commission that you want me to investigate and find more information, completely, yeah.
One of the things that I've found a little bit confusing as we've talked about various different possibilities for moving things is the fact that a particular space could be used by 1 or 2 or 3 different uses. And so it's a little bit complicated to think about moving something before you know what else you'll be needing to move into the space or what you might be booting out. So I guess what I would just say, I don't have a dog, so I'm going to suggest if we have members that have a lot of contact with dogs, that perhaps those people would be good members of this subcommittee. But having said, I don't know who will be on it, but I do think that for those folks who are kind of evaluating all of the different sites, if there's a way to understand sites that are also are lined up for potential other uses, that's helpful for me, just in terms of understanding all the different balls in the air at any given moment. Yes.
Yeah, I think at the recent city council meeting, member Nason was particularly mentioned that the area under the freeway overpasses, as people start thinking about what potential uses those could have, that there's somehow a bigger picture integrating different ideas, kind of along what you're saying.
Well, yeah.
It's just,
curious
we
about
would be
how that
making
might-
recommendation, like this could be a potential site. Doesn't mean we're going to build it tomorrow, but that would go to council for their consideration. So if you want to, I'm sure you guys have read the questions, I just started these, but I think that, you know, these plus any other questions that, even if you're not on the subcommittee, you could submit to have the subcommittee look at. So if you think of other things after tonight that you want to make sure are included in that, I can surely pass those along.
Yeah, I mean, I would just personally, when I was looking at like how the site should be rated and scored, I think there's a lot of considerations, like, you know, can we walk to it? Is it in a central location in Albany? Is it community building? Is just, you know, parking, and then also just the fact that if it's a location like under the freeway, where I assume most people would drive to, there's other locations very close that you can also drive to for dog usage. So just as a note, if I'm not on the subcommittee, I just wanted to put that out there.
It's a great point. I will say that one of the Section B users, Sam, did some extra work and gave it like a little draft of what are some qualifications that you might look for in a dog park. So I'll submit that to the subcommittee, maybe as a launching pad. But he had some great ideas that were in there, you know, size, amenity, is there seating, is there vehicle access, water, is there a restroom nearby? So there were a lot of qualities in a nice dog park area that he had started on his initial spreadsheet. So I'll share that with the subcommittee.
Great, and I think then, does anybody else have questions or comments? I personally, I don't know if other commissioners have opinions, but in terms of public comment, obviously you can say whatever you wish, but it would be great to get input on how to reach out to different stakeholders. So to the extent that you want to talk about that, if you are here to speak on this item. So I'll open it up now to public comment. So if anybody has a comment, like to approach the podium. Yeah, then, yeah, please go ahead.
Folks can say whatever you like. It's an
Yeah.
open comment.
And if you don't mind, when you're addressing the commission, can you state your name and address?
Rochelle Donovan. I live at 25 San Carlos Avenue. Technically, I'm in El Cerrito, but I'm 4 houses down from the border. So, and we have a dog, and we use it quite regularly. The questions that I would like to be added is just the walkability to that place, because different places in the city are walkable by different, or farther than other places. And, you know, just thinking about all the green places in Albany, they seem to be on all 4 sections. Then Memorial Park is more in the middle, and so that just seems more walkable for more people. Some other places are more isolated for the walkability, which would increase our carbon footprint. More people would drive there, which means you would have more people from out of town coming and using, and so you get more users. So just, you know, the walkability is a big piece. And the walkability is also important because kids can bring their dogs, and so it gives them that sense of responsibility and being a part of the helping their families out. And I think that's important too. So if it's not a place where kids can get to, then it's not the dog is not a family affair. It becomes a parent affair. And that, you know, I think is really important for our kids to become more and more independent in Albany. I'm a school teacher in Albany, so the independence for kids is a big piece, and giving them that chance to do that, I think it will help them be lifelong citizens and things like that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
While they're coming up, I would just add that I mentioned the area under the freeway, but I would oppose a dog park there for those kinds of reasons, accessibility.
My name's Karen Platt, and I live at 934 Evelyn. And I agree with what Rochelle said. The only thing I want to add is my dog is 15 months old, and I do go to Point Isabel, and I go to the Albany Bulb. But she doesn't always come back when I want her to. So I really, really appreciate a smallish, compared to those two places, dog park where she gets to play with other dogs, gets exercise, gets tired, and it's not an ordeal for me to get her back. So there's a need for these small community places in addition to the wonderful big ones that we have.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. Jim Johnston, 1026 Peralta. Just a data point for you. I go through Tevlin Park almost every morning with my dog, at least 5 days a week. We do 2 one-mile walks each day, usually, a minimum of half mile each time. And going through Tevlin Park, at the times I go through, there's between 0 and 12 dogs. They get along fine with each other. They get along fine with the people that are also in the park. If I want a longer walk with the dog, I take her to Point Isabel. That works out great also. So it's just a data point for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where is Tevlin Park?
Are you referring to Terrace Park? Terrace Park?
I'm sorry.
It's on Tevlin.
Street. Yeah,
It's on Tevlin, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments?
They say if you do this, then you feel like a superhero before you speak. My name is Leslie Zephyr, and I live in Richmond. I go to Memorial every day. I have been in one of those old ad hoc committees with John way back when. I was there when we set up the rules that are currently in place that most of us abide by. There are some who are rebels and choose not to. I cannot say nice things about these people. I would like to be on any committee that is formed to discuss this. I hope Shell, who has been wonderful through this, will keep me in mind. I just want to say that the reason I go all the way to Albany when I live all the way in Richmond is because I do most of my business in Albany. I go to 5 Star Video. I shop there. I lament the passing of Andronicos. My acupuncturist is over there. My chiropractor is over there. I go to Pharma on Solano. I go to the theater. So that's how I actually found Memorial. And I've been going there for a good 4 years. And as I've said, and you've probably heard it, a number of you, but there are a number of us, we're the afternoon group. It's like when you take your kid to the playground and everybody knows everybody. That's what it's become like. And most of the people that I hang with during those hours are actually Albany residents or live on the border like this woman here. And it's just a lovely park. And even though my dog is without doubt the best dog in the world, if she sees a squirrel or a duck, she's gone. And so Memorial solves that problem for me. There's enough room for her to run her heart out. There are great dogs who normally are not aggressive. Most of the people, again, are very responsible. So I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I know this is up for discussion, but that's my 2 cents, and I felt I had to say something, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I ask you one quick question? So how would we find other people like you to be part of this discussion? How would we reach out? Do you think signs at the park would do it? Or?
Yes, but you literally, and I don't know why, at one point in time, I think it was last year, there was this huge sign, incredibly large sign about being considerate of the neighbors and this type of thing. And it took those of us who go there every day about a week to realize it, because you're so used to just, it would be as though the sign was here and I'm used to seeing you every day and I walk right by it. So I would say send out, as Shell normally does, anything to do with the park to everybody on the email blast, and to put up signs, especially on as people are coming in on that front gate. And of course, I will be talking it up, as will most of my peers there. But that, aside from those 2 things, I don't know what else you can do. because hundreds and hundreds of people go to this park, you know? And I'm going to stop there. That's
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one more thing. When we found out that this was an issue, we just have a few days' worth of petitions. So here's like 120 signatures of people from the dog park and Memorial Park and others who are interested. If you want these to help you with outreach,
Yeah, great, thank you. That can be part of the record, right? So thank you very much.
these are copies.
Any other comments? Thank you, what a great list, what an email list right there. So, oh, sorry.
I'm Winnie Owen Kostancic, 522 Carmel Avenue, right on the corner of Thousand Oaks, right across from the park. I really hadn't intended to speak tonight. I was just here to kind of listen, find out what the procedure was going to be. I just wanted to say that we have some varying concerns about Section B among the neighbors. We have some neighbors that are adamantly opposed to any dog park being there, and that ranges to those of us who are not, but we like to see the rules complied with. And it seems that increasingly people have been trying to get around the rules and defeat the lock on the gates and that kind of thing. And I know one of my neighbors has expressed problems with increased barking of the dogs, although there is a sign in the park that does encourage people to restrain their dogs from barking. But one neighbor is particularly upset by that. And I think those are the main concerns right now, is just getting people to comply with the guidelines that seem to have worked pretty well. You know, I know some of my concerns that I had when the dog park was being set up have been addressed, and I'm reasonably comfortable with it being there for the most part, except when people are trying to sneak into the park or put their kids over the fence to open the gate from the inside and that kind of thing. So anyway, like I said, I hadn't intended to speak, but I thought I would just raise those couple of concerns that people do have.
Thank you. I think that's it for comments, unless, Mark? Okay, so.
I don't think Mark has a comment.
Okay, so can we bring it back to the commission for any questions? I would just like to say thank you, and if, I don't know, Shelley has your information? Or if not, then we'd welcome your participation and email to. Okay. Sorry, what's your name again? Winnie, okay, thank you.
You on here? Okay.
And I think it's relatively easy to get hold of the neighbors because
That's true.
they're neighbors.
That's
So
right.
we can mail to them or
Yep.
knock doors even, but it's the users of the park come from all over.
Yep. Any questions or comments?
Actually, I have one more idea, sorry, because I was hearing the concerns of the neighbors, and I think just having better signage. You have a list of rules. It's like a chalkboard. It's small writing. Nobody sees it. Nobody reads it. And, you know, even someone said, oh, you're not supposed to bring neuter dogs here, or neuter dogs. I'm like, yeah, it says on the sign, because I read things. So signage, I think, thinking about signage, how can you improve the signage with the rules so that it's not this big old list that people aren't reading, that it's, you know, eye level and we can see it and it's big enough, because that might help us police each other. Like, see, it really says dogs aren't supposed to bark, you know, or whatever it is. It's more helpful if it's visual and not if it's just a long list that no one's reading. So that's just something to think about too, so.
Thank you.
I just have one more thing. This is just a friendly, gentle reminder, because in the past, the talking about dogs can become emotional in some situations. Also, we're creating a subcommittee, and so this is my nudge to you guys about remembering that as commissioners, you're trying to weigh all different sides, even if you have a dog and you go to Section B, or if you know someone who lives over there, or any of those things. It's just make sure you're hearing people and taking the information in and trying to make the best decision. This is from your advisory book, but just to set aside personal biases and try to think about the community as a whole when possible when making your recommendations.
Thank you, Shelley. I think that's really important. Curious about your potential level of involvement. I know this is a subcommittee thing, but you did say that staff, so I'm just wondering where you might fit in that process.
I will definitely be there as your note taker, helper, kind
Okay.
of helping you facilitate. You might pick someone who might be the lead of the group, but I will attend the meetings. I added staff in there because you may want to talk to police, or you may want to talk to Public Works, or you may want to talk to other people that are city staff. So.
Great, thanks. Any comments, questions?
I think on that front, along with the census of the number of dogs and where we see them gathering formally or informally, I would be interested to know if there have been just any police or public works or issues that have come up, just to kind of get a fuller history of how that happens, both in this particular space, but also just throughout the city in dog-related matters.
It is a good point. I sent the lieutenant a note today to have them go through their log for the past couple of years, just to get an idea. There's dog calls in all parks and also in Section B. So they should
Right.
be generating that information.
And then the only other thing is, I've lived in New York City where they had very small areas for dogs. So I know, but if there are guidelines or best practices about size specifications for dog parks, or like in New York, I've seen small dog parks where there was a special section that had a shorter fencing that was just for smaller dogs to be able to be together, kind of like a smaller section of a playground or something like that that's geared towards that size dog. So just to think about that, because we have talked about different locations, and as I was walking on the Greenway today, I was thinking, what size dog would be suited at a space like that? I don't know, but someone probably does, so.
Great.
Yep, and I think that I like that idea of guidelines and best practices, and I think that should also, I guess if a police and public works report for all dog parks or dog usage areas in Albany would make sense, but it's also interesting to know, if Albany commits to having a legitimate, dog park named as such, maybe, City of Berkeley can give us information on what happens when you have a full dog park, no matter, that's exclusively used for dogs, and it may be the same level of sort of response required if the city invests in that. So, anything else?
So what do you think our next step is here?
So our next step is is it a motion to ask who wants to, or just a question? Who is interested in being part of the subcommittee? And I'll raise my hand.
Oh, we got 4, we need 3.
So, Shelley?
Do we arm wrestle?
Can you choose an alternate?
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Because you can have 3. 4 is a quorum.
I'm fine with being an alternate.
Okay. Okay.
So
thanks.
can you?
So it would be,
Hand again, who- Okay.
Todd, Commissioner Abbott, Commissioner Chang-Frank, and Commissioner Romero. Okay, and then Commissioner Martin as an alternate. And so alternate, in terms of alternates, if one of us can't make a meeting, then Commissioner Martin can step in. Okay, great. Thank you.
That works.
And is there any other planning that the alternate can be involved with that maybe, I don't know, I'm just wondering what the rules are.
Well, I can distribute all information
Okay.
to Commissioner Martin. We'd have to
Okay.
just bring him up to speed if he's going to sit in on something. There may be times, though, that's when you have a meeting all together. So there might be a time when the 2 of you might be going and having a small group discussion with, let's say, a neighbor group or a Section B group of people. So there is possibility to have kind of helpers in there.
That would be great, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's think through that.
Great.
How you can participate.
Okay. So, okay, thanks. So then I think we'll move on to the next item.
Just one item that was mentioned specifically was a schedule or some idea
Oh, yes.
of timeline.
Thank you. Yeah, so can we get the commission to weigh in on that kind of schedule? And I guess maybe history from you, Shelley, about how if this has been before the commission before, how long that process took for subcommittee.
Yes, this has been through the commission a million times, different versions of this discussion. But maybe we could settle on getting that initial date set up. What we put in the recommendation, or our request to city council, is that we would get them something by December, just to
Okay,
give it a.
that's good to know.
In time.
And are there requirements on public notification for something like this?
Not
Do we
for
need
the-
to keep that in mind,
No.
not for a subcommittee situation?
Correct. As long as you have less than a quorum, then you don't have.
Would we still have the ability to mail residents notification?
Yes.
So that's okay,
It's
just,
just advisory body members.
okay,
Yes.
okay, thank
So
you.
4 of you could not be at that meeting. If you wanted to
Right,
have 4 of
sure.
you there, we would just have to post it as a public meeting.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so next item,
Can I just add also, as people are thinking about it, I don't know what the geographic diversity of the subcommittee is, but just to make sure that we're thinking about all of the various geographic sections of Albany as you're thinking about things.
I think you're pretty spread out. Perfect. Yeah, we have a kind of Dartmouthy, Adamsy, just past Memorial Parky, and you are over in the.
Garfield, Garfield neighborhood.
Thank you for using it.
Somebody should.
No, nobody up in the Terrace Park section, but we don't necessarily have one. I think you're the closest because you're on Peralta, but to that neighborhood. Okay, great.
okay, so next item is, city tree information.
I'll send out an email to the subcommittee to try to pick a date for the first meeting. Is that fine?
Oh,
Do you
right
wanna-
now, or?
I don't know if we're,
That's fine, that's fine.
Yes,
able to-
I think so,
No.
to be determined, right? So, okay, great. Okay, city tree information, John?
Been looking forward to this meeting, for this presentation for about 2 years now. This is great.
no pressure.
Let me ask. Maybe 4 years.
I don't really it just says tree-related topics.
Yeah.
It's like a mystery. What is going to be?
No, these are answers. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, our mouse stopped working, so. So John is doing this presentation at a request from the commission, just to kind of get through some stuff. We have new commissioners, the tree policy, we're talking about accepted tree lists. We had a lot of questions that have come up. So John has prepared this to just start orienting, new members and also answer some open questions rather than when we have an item come before you.
Oh, we have a handout here.
Oh, hi.
I just came to speak on behalf of the dog park, and I probably missed the meeting, but
We just moved on. Is it acceptable to, what do you, it's up to.
You're in charge.
I'm in charge. Go ahead, yeah.
But come up to the, come to
Yeah,
the
go
mic.
ahead, and if you don't mind saying your name and your address for the record.
Or roughly where you live.
hi, my name's Leslie Alperin, and I actually live in Berkeley, so I don't know if I can speak in an Albany meeting. Anyway,
We just won't
I
listen.
live right at the edge of Berkeley, Albany, 797 Vincente Avenue, and I recently got a dog and started going to the dog park every single day since it reopened after the rains. And I had heard some buzz from other people that there was some discussion about possibly closing that dog park. And then today I was just at the dog park and it was like 10 to 8 and we were already getting ready to leave to respect the time frame of the dog park. And we suddenly saw a sign that this meeting was taking place and someone wrote it written on like a paper bag. And somebody said, had there been prior notification? And I was just surprised because I've been going there every night, and nobody's ever mentioned anything to me about having a meeting. So I'm sorry I missed the time to speak on the agenda, but I just wanted you all to know that people who frequent that dog park, at least the people I talk to who come after 6:30 at night, nobody seemed to know that there was going to be a meeting and discussing it. So, and everybody really loves the dog park, so I'm sure they'd want to have their 2 cents worth if they knew there was a forum going on, so.
If I could make a recommendation that on the city's website, we have it's called e-notification.
Okay.
And on there, you can check a box, and
Okay.
there's one for dog, says like dog-related issues. If you check that box, you'll get every agenda that has that topic of dogs on it. So
Okay.
we've been encouraging people to sign up for that when possible. Otherwise, we'll post something on the fence, and we can't guarantee that it's always there. We had put up the council one, different agendas, but they sometimes come down. don't
I
know
see,
why.
okay.
But in order to make sure and not have to really think about it, that's one way to do it. So we'll be making sure that we pass this along to these people we contact as well. So when there is a dog item on the agenda, you'll get an email of the agenda right to you.
Okay, yeah, I just
Just on
wanted
the
to
city's
say, I lived in San Francisco many years ago, and there was dispute over a dog park location in part of the city. We went to Park and Rec, so I have a little experience in this, and, I just, on behalf of the dog owners, I understand if neighbors have problems with noise and dogs barking, but for the most part, I think most dogs are not barking there, and when a dog is barking, everybody's telling the dog to be quiet. But it's a great, I don't know if any of you have dogs, but it's a great place for community. And I only know my immediate neighbors, and now that I've been going to the dog park, I know all these people. So I really think, if you want to foster community in Albany, it would be a very good place to maintain.
So just so you know, the agenda item tonight was just talk about the process going forward. So we're going to start doing more outreach and have meetings about specifically pros and cons for the dog park. I don't want you to think that you missed your one opportunity to speak up. You'll have plenty more.
Good, okay, yeah, because we
Just so
just
you know.
saw the sign and everybody was like, oh
Absolutely.
my God,
And the
it's
sign just
almost
said meeting
over."
tonight. It didn't say what it's about. Understood, but yeah.
Okay, well,
Very
thank
good.
you for letting me speak.
Sure.
I'll
Thank
sign
you.
up for the notification.
Great, thanks. Okay, so John?
Okay, so I was asked to give a presentation on basically what I do, more leaning towards removal since that's what comes before the commission. So I'm going to start out with what I found on the books in Albany referring to trees. So basically, municipal code states that the property owner is responsible to keep their trees in a safe or non-dangerous condition. Trees, shrubs, any landscaping, so it doesn't interfere with public use of the sidewalk or streets. So basically, it's saying that property owner is responsible to maintain trees, landscaping, anything in the public right of way. And it states that they will be liable if there are any kind of damage or injuries because of vegetation in the public way adjoining their property. It doesn't really state that they're responsible for, it doesn't say what the city would do, what repercussions there are if there is no maintenance done on their trees, so, yeah. So this is something, I've been working on this kind of tree myths, concerns list because I find these repeating things in the city, so I'm just going to run through some of these pretty quickly. And most of these affect trees in a way that may lead to the tree dying and or needing to be removed, so I included these. Planting, some people think you plant the tree nice and deep, dig a nice deep hole, and that's going to kill the tree pretty much quickly, and within days possibly. So tree needs to be planted at the root flare should be above ground. So these are things you may or may not know, but these are things I deal with. This I don't see too often because we do most of the planting, or we have a contract to do planting, but I see private trees and people sometimes adding soil thinking they're helping the tree by giving it more soil and smothering the root crown and leading to tree death. I've seen this too, again, on private property where people like to plant the tree in the pot thinking that's going to keep the roots from spreading or whatever they're thinking, I don't know, but that's not a good way to do it. Mulching. This is something I see once in a while too, and again, it's the kind of well-intentioned property owner thinking they're caring for their tree by making a big pile of mulch around the trunk of their tree, and it's basically what's referred to as a mulch volcano, where you have this big pile, and you're retaining moisture at the base of the trunk, allowing fungus to grow, which is going to eventually lead to the tree's demise, possibly. It also encourages adventitious root growth out in the mulch, and the roots grow out into nothing. There's mulch, and they can become girdling roots and strangle a tree, smother the tree. Also, in this picture, you see the pile of mulch is kind of smothering roots where they are. Roots need gas exchange. They need exposure to air. This is something I deal with sometimes. This is something I deal with frequently. I've removed hundreds and hundreds of tree stakes throughout the city. And to me, for one thing, they look ugly. After a while, they're really difficult to get out. And they're not required. Basically, a tree stake's required if a tree needs it, just until the roots get a chance to start growing into the native soil and establish itself. Usually within a year, the stake should be removed. But I find a lot of these where the stakes are left in, the straps are there, there's more straps added on. This is one from yesterday I took out, was it yesterday? Yeah, 2 days ago. And this one's not too bad, but the tree obviously doesn't need to be staked. But it seems like a lot of people feel like why did you pull up my stake? And you know, I tell them I'm liberating the tree. It doesn't need the crotch, it doesn't need the training wheels, the tree is fine. In fact, it's better off without the stake, because as it kind of blows and bends in the wind, it grows tougher fiber, and it's a stronger tree that way. Here's another one recently. There's wire and tape and rope and a few different stakes. I'm not sure what the idea was, but I think it's just this belief that you need to have a stake to protect your tree. So this is a close-up, and it's hard to see, but above the white strip, I think it's wire on the top, was actually digging into the tree, and there's a little bit of bark growing over it, and it's kind of ripped open a wound in the tree.
These are graphic images.
But are they, were they the
This
city
is
trees?
actual Albany, too, so I cleaned that up. I talked to someone who worked in that building, and I laid down some mulch, and I actually restaked the tree because it was a little shaky. For some reason, the soil is really low there. They had a large, probably a camphor removed years ago, and this tree was planted. And
So this is a street tree. This is a city
Yeah.
tree. Wow, okay.
So another thing I find is for mulch, people like to use rocks, bricks, gravel. Not the worst thing, but not the best thing either. It's kind of a heat sink, so it's keeping the soil warm late into the evening. When things cool down, the soil's still warm because these rocks and bricks are holding heat, and that dries the soil out. And with the drought conditions, all that we've been having, it's not the best thing, but you know, it's kind of personal preference. Some people like the look; it's nice and clean like that. But something like that, if you ever walk barefoot on the street on a hot day, you can imagine that's soaking in a lot of heat and maintaining that heat late into the evening. And then there's this.
That's Albany?
This is Albany. This is right off of Solano Avenue. There's 2 magnolia trees where they're just cemented right up. And the street, you can kind of see, it's been shaved down a little bit, but there's some orange lines where there's cracks. The whole street is cracked and buckled. And the owner called me talking about wanting to remove the trees, and I said, well, no, first we remove the concrete, which is part of the reason why the street's buckled so badly, because the tree roots are looking for air and moisture, and they have nowhere to go, so they keep going. And as they go, they get thicker, and they lift the concrete and cause damage. So this will be part of a sidewalk repair program, and this will be opened up too. So I think we're going a 9x6 tree basin for this. So for this and the other one there. So there it is at Solano in the background. You can see it lifting by the curb and all that. So I don't know how long that's been there, but too long. Another thing that I run across occasionally, and this may be a concern if we're enforcing the municipal code that says the property owner is responsible to maintain their own trees. Tree topping, stubbing. I get a lot of stubbing, kind of lower stuff where, a branch is out in the sidewalk and someone gets annoyed and either just breaks it or just clips, and there's a lot of stubs going around. And basically you get things like the center picture where there's just a lot of bushy growth where they just stubbed it back because the tree's trying to recuperate. It's trying to put out some leaf growth to generate the energy from the part that was just snipped off. In the long term, on the right, it's hard to see, but these branches that are growing out, they get larger. And as they get larger, where the tree was stubbed off, as on the left picture, it starts to decay. So the larger branch is connected to a section of a limb that's decaying, and they break out. And it's kind of this kind of abuse to trees creates more work down the line. There's a lot of maintenance. A lot of people think we cut everything off, we don't have to sweep up the leaves, we don't have to take care of the tree too much, and it's the opposite. It just creates more problems. So that's not what we want a tree to look like, and I don't know why some people think that's looks good or that's what you do to a tree, but just there's a lot of misunderstanding. We're always learning more and more about trees, so some old school thought possibly. But here's one that's in Albany, and you can see that this is actually liquid amber, one of our favorite trees, and it's been topped, and it's just growing out like crazy in every direction. So that's just a mess there. There's a pile of dried leaves in there that it looks like a nest, but it's just leaves that are caught because there's so many new sprouts coming out of that. That's just a mess. Here's another example. This is Albany also. This is a private tree, but I see a lot of private trees. I see this happening, and I actually created a little leaflet. When I see this, I stop and I put it on their front door, and I make a note in the book where I notified people. It says tree topping is dangerous, and just a little education. So there are some cases where tree topping is considered acceptable, and it's hard to see in this, but there's a little woodpecker hole about 6 feet down from that one cut, and this is across the street from my house in Berkeley, actually. And walking my dog, I was wondering why there's always sawdust on the ground, and I would hear, and sure enough, there was a little woodpecker nest in there. So to preserve habitat, possibly you retain something like that, but for the most part, tree topping is not at all what we want to do with trees. Fertilizing, I get calls sometimes, my tree looks sad, should I add some fertilizer? And no, basically, fertilizing for trees, you want a tree to adapt to the native soil. Usually there's enough mineral, there's enough nutrition in the native soil. Usually, we're urban soil, it's not the best soil, but the thing to do is to add compost and mulch. That's going to feed the tree. But when people say fertilize, they want to put Miracle Grow down. And Miracle Grow will lead to this on trees. You get aphids, too much nitrogen in plants. It attracts insects, and aphids are one that love nitrogen. So another myth, and I don't see this too much, but I've seen a few trees where painting wounds or filling cavities with concrete to kind of stop the decay, it actually leads to more decay. It holds moisture in there. If there's always fungus, there's always bacteria, fungus in the air. You paint over a tree wound, and you're just sealing it in so it can propagate underneath that. Balancing, I get this sometimes, and this may be a concern, but in most cases it's not necessarily a concern because the tree's been growing that way. Trees grow phototropically. They're looking for sunlight. So if they're planted in the shade or under the shade of a larger tree, they're going to grow out at an angle. The concern is when it's a sudden change. Suddenly the tree's leaning. If it's been growing like that for a while, it's not a concern. You usually can see the tree kind of correcting, growing up once it gets out into the sunlight. I worked in utility forestry for many years, and we've seen and had this done to a lot of trees. And it's not a concern, you know, the tree's strong enough. Even this sudden change to the tree is not necessarily, I mean, it's a concern. It looks horrible, but it's not a concern that the tree's going to topple over. Trees have extensive root systems. You'll see a lot of this picture of a tree crown and the tree roots mirroring the tree crown. That's incorrect. The tree roots go out 3-4 times the size of the crown generally on a tree. So this is one that's in Albany, and this is, I'm not sure when this is, but this tree's been leaning, I went through, this is a Google image, I went through Google, and I should have added an older, I don't think I got the older photo, but this tree was at one point growing straight up, and it's been leaning more and more over time, but it's still not moving, you know, it's very slowly moving. And this week I went and did some pruning on it, and it looked like this. It's got a really extreme lean. This is still a concern to me. This is more than a 15 degree lean. It's a concern, and because historically I can see that it wasn't growing like this all the time. So I went and I trimmed a lot off the lean side, and I'm just going to keep an eye on it. It's on Solano. I drive past it 12 times a day at least. I can keep an eye on this, but I'm hoping that roots will compensate. The roots are always trying to compensate when there's lean or pressure on the tree. They're going to grow out and try to grow out on the stress side of the tree. And I'm hoping that this one will survive, even though it has the lean to it. Roots and sewers, my tree needs to be removed because it's damaging my sewer line. And yes and no on this one also. These diagrams here kind of show roots getting into the sewer line and eventually destroying the sewer line. But what's happened here is there's a leak, or in this picture, there's a connection that's not completely sealed. The smallest opening in a sewer line, tree roots, the feeder roots on trees are practically microscopic, hair-like. They're going to get into any tiny opening. Once they're in there, there's moisture, there's food, they start growing and loving it and inviting all their friends in, and pretty soon there's a big party and they destroy the place. But the solution to this is not to remove the tree. In this situation like this, the solution is to repair the sewer line. That's what needs to be done, regardless of the tree. So you repair the sewer line. The new poly, even though this is a lateral, generally they last a lifetime. So this one, who knows what happened? It cracked. It wasn't connected correctly. There was some kind of opening that allowed the roots to get into. But yeah, we don't need to take down trees because the sewer line needs to be replaced. Trees and wires, another thing, I get a lot of calls about trees and wires. And again, I worked with utilities. I worked with PG&E and other utilities for a long time. And the PUC General Order 95, Rule 35 states that utilities are required to maintain 18 inches from all high voltage lines at all times. So when I get a call that we need to trim the tree because it's in my wires, I know that it's not a high voltage wire because PG&E cannot allow that. It can't allow a tree to get within 18 inches of a high voltage wire, and it's a big deal. I've been through it. You know, there's all kinds of auditing and everything that goes on when we get there, and it's very rare where a tree will actually get to a high voltage wire, and if it does, PG&E needs to deal with it. We can't deal with it. I can't get a contractor. It has to be a specially certified tree worker to do that kind of work. The other wires, including the low voltage secondary distribution wires, they're low voltage. They're considered low voltage. And PG&E, well, according to GO 95 Rule 35, there's no pruning required unless there's excessive strain or abrasion on the wire. This includes the service drops, electric service drops, telephone and cable, even lower voltage wires. If I can do a little snip with the pole and free up the wire, I'll do that, but generally I'll tell them it's not really a concern, and When I was with PG&E, we looked at a lot of these and we said, well, that tree is actually supporting the wire. You know, it's protecting it, it's kind of bracing it up. It's not a problem for the wire to be touching the tree. If there's a lot of stress on it, that's a different situation. And mostly I haven't found any of that. So I'm trying to avoid pruning these unless I think it really needs it. You know, just touching the wire is not an issue. So, although, and I, with the caveat that, you know, any wire, it's a good idea when people call in just to be safe. And I may direct them to PG&E if they want further explanation on how to deal with trees around wires. Here's PG&E's diagrams. We don't have transmission in Albany. On the left, the top, transmissions, what is it, 750 or above, 750 volts or above. I think that's what it is. I think Mosier Lane has transmission lines coming down the hill there. Those are the closest I could think of. But we have a lot of primary distribution. They're 12 kV, kilovolts, I should say, 12 kV or 4 kV lines. And then you have secondary, which are considered low voltage, and then telephone cable. Basically, the lower on the pole, the lower the voltage, the higher the voltage. High voltage is always marked with the yellow placard that says high voltage. Anything at that level or above is high voltage. Anything below it is considered not high voltage. So transformer, the jumper lines are high voltage to the transformer, but coming out of the transformer, it's low voltage. And again, it shows the service drops going to houses and businesses that are considered low voltage wires. Also, the one thing that most of the service drops, the newer ones, is a few old ones, but I can't think of one now. There used to be three lines unprotected that would go to buildings. Now there's 2 insulated wires. They're wrapped around a steel cable, which is a ground wire, and it supports the wire too. So they're designed to withstand some tree contact, some tree pressure.
Can you just explain what the guy wire is?
The guy wire, that supports the pole.
It's just, okay.
That's not a conductor,
I'm not sure if it's going anywhere.
but they have what's called a guy bob, a little ceramic thing on it where one wire wraps around this way, one wraps this way without touching. In case there's an incident where a wire comes down and touches the guy wire, it keeps it from grounding out or becoming a live wire. But again, you know, any wire, if you don't know anything about it, ask the question. That's good. So insects and ants, I get a lot of calls. Mostly it's ants are crawling up and down the tree, and it's not really a concern. I mean, they're part of a larger ecosystem. People see trees as isolated, you know, its own separate being, just like we see ourselves as being not connected to everything else. But trees are part of the ecosystem. Insects are part of that ecosystem. Ants will indicate usually that there's some kind of insect, like aphids again. They kind of corral the aphids, and they take their honeydew, the sticky stuff that you see on the sidewalks, whatever. But aphids aren't a permanent situation in a tree. Aphids kind of come and go during the seasons, depending on stress on the tree. And so it's not really a concern. It's something that comes up. You might get some sticky on your car for a little part of the year, but it's not something we're going to remove a tree for, and I've gotten requests for that. So, even termites, I've seen termites on trees in Albany, and basically termites are eating the dead, decaying part of a tree where there's a wound in a tree. They don't get it. Trees sectionalize off damage or wounds. They don't get beyond that section. They're just eating what's there for them to eat, the dead stuff. So. Woolly aphids, these are a problem on the crabapple trees. They're a problem, but again, they kind of come and go. But when they're there, they're sucking insects, they're sucking the sap, they're sucking the sugars out of the tree. They're weakening the tree, but eventually they go away. There's natural predators, such as ladybugs, that come and feast on the aphids. So they'll come in waves, and again, what I recommend when people call about insects or aphids on the trees is water your tree, first of all. Most trees are water starved in the city. And throw some mulch down, prop it up, support your tree, give it, make it healthy, and it'll be able to fight off the insects. So this leads to tree removal. If there's some of these situations are extreme or the combination of several of these conditions, tree may need to be removed. So how that works is that basically this is a instruction list from Tony, the previous arborist that was left for me. So this is the kind of condensed version of how tree removal works. So if a homeowner wishes to have a tree removed, they apply to the city by filling out an application. They bring it with the fee to City Hall, and the request will be heard as an agenda. Parks and Rec Commission. City staff may also request the removal of a tree by applying to Parks and Rec Commission, which is also heard as an agenda item. Trees may pose a high risk or may be likely to fail imminently. Trees may also be dead. These cases are assessed by city staff and acted on immediately when public safety is a concern. Public may bring such emergencies to the attention of the city, but emergency removals are acted on by staff. And this is our form. You've all seen the removal form. This is the staff report that I fill out when I receive a removal form. You've seen this also. And this is a tree evaluation form that I developed. This is more for myself, but I share it with you just so I go through the checklist of things that I should be looking at when I evaluate a tree. And then I'll go to Parcel Quest, and I'll find the property, and I pull up a 150-foot buffer. We need to notify property owners within 150 feet of the address of the tree. And then I print out a list of all the property owners. I make flyers, I fold them, I label, usually about 30 or so. I eat my apple, and then I post the tree with the same notice that gets mailed out to everybody. So that's basically the process that I follow. You're working on reviewing, revising the removal policy and procedure. So I just added some pictures of trees that have been taken out. A lot of camphors have suffered. They're mature. They're post-mature. A lot of these camphor trees. So, and they suffer a lot with the drought that we had. There's a lot of dead wood in these trees, and there's a lot of sidewalk, curb, street damage caused by them. So this is one that was taken out. It looks like there's a lot of green there, but there's a lot of epicormic growth, and this commission has reviewed this tree, so a lot of this will be repeat. All of this will be repeat, I believe. So here's one that was taken out. This is a liquid amber tree. Liquid ambers are even worse than camphor trees. They're faster growing, and they do a lot of damage. And here's one where, I recommend opening the planting strip to give the roots room to grow, and this is what was done here, or the condition was left that way, and you can see that the roots did fill that space, but they went beyond that. So it's a liquid amber in a 27-inch planting strip. It's not a good idea. So. Here's one where a tree split out, and the property owner actually came out with his chainsaw and cut off the part that was split. And this was a while back. This was a small tree that we took out. But here's another liquid amber that doesn't look too bad, but if you look closely, and I had other shots of this where you can see a lot of old wounds, a lot of limbs were taken off of this tree. A lot of limbs were falling off, including this one, which is what prompted me to come out at this point, and the owner requested that this be removed. So that was a pretty sizable limb, and this was approved for removal. Here's one of what we call eucalyptus. It's a peppermint leaf. I can't even remember. We call it eucalyptus. They're not really eucalyptus, but they're related, on Solano. And there's several like this. Again, they're very mature trees, very large trees, doing some sidewalk damage. This one had pushed out the curb. There's no curb. There's still no curb there after the tree. This was removed. And the reason it was removed was because a limb this size came down, and this was the church on the corner, and the pastor of the church took this picture and sent it to me, and he and I were both thankful that the limb didn't cause any damage to anybody or any property, but we reviewed this and decided this tree should come out. So here's another one more recent. This is a camphor tree. Sidewalk had been repaired in the past. There's all these huge cuts. I'm not sure why, what happened to these things, to these limbs or trunks of the tree, but they were removed. There's bark peeling, decay at the bottom of the trunk, and that's what it looked like. A little hard to see, but it basically was half or a third of a tree standing there, and it had a huge root base and was causing more sidewalk.
I just have a question, and also, is it okay if we ask questions? Because I definitely want to have time for that, too. We have a number of other items, too, on the agenda.
Sure.
So one of the questions I have, as you talk about tree topping, is, and first of all, I appreciate all of the proactive work you've been doing, like with the leaflets about tree topping, and then just doing the pruning to make sure that the trees stay healthy, and cutting off the stakes, which I can imagine is just somebody planted it there, maybe somebody even from the city, and then just never got back around to.
The city.
Yeah,
Most
so
of them.
thank you for taking care of all that. But just curious about the tree topping, and I know this is something that maybe Mark can weigh in on, but what are we thinking about, like, how to sort of, I mean, that just seems like an egregious act, and sometimes we get these trees. They're like, oh, this tree's dead because it's been topped, and so it just seems like I just feel like the incentives are off, because we're then paying to potentially cut down or remove this tree that was potentially damaged by that property owner. So
Sure.
I mean, what to do about that? I don't have a solution, but just curious.
I've been working on, you want to? Okay, I've been working on a tree policy for the city, and the part where I kind of stalled was fees and fines for things. What I found in municipal code, there's municipal code against damaging public property, which would be a tree, obstruction of sidewalk and streets, which would be possibly trees or bushes, whatever, that kind of thing. There's different fees for different things. There's fees that are, I can't remember. I have it, I'm trying to make some sense out of it, and I can't implement it, but I'm trying to get something that I can present.
To council or?
Hopefully to council eventually, and get something approved where there's something we can do. There's different fees where it's $100, and then every day until they fix it, it's $100, which is kind of extreme, I think, for some of these things. But I'm working on it.
Great. And that would be like direct from you and Mark to city council? Is that how that process would work, or?
Not sure. Start the timer.
No, I'll be quick. I think we've had a number of discussions internally about this, and I think that's the area where we struggle, because we don't have the teeth to actually go out and find somebody, and unless we catch them in the act, it's hard to really pin it on somebody. So I think that's one of the things we're struggling. But as John said, he's working on more of a tree policy, and if that ever goes to council, I think that's one of the issues we'd have to tackle as part of that. Maybe not the most satisfactory answer, but that's where we are right now.
And just curious, since you're the head of DPW, is the tree replanting part of DPW?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious about, because obviously we replant trees after we've removed one, but is there any additional tree planting sort of, I don't know, program outside of the replacement of trees?
Well, I think John has a contract to do limited plantings, but we don't have we don't look to, I think there was one point, there was a number thrown out there, we're going to plant 400 trees per year on a year-over-year basis, and the amount of land you would need to do that would just get overwhelming. But I think John does have a contract in place to go plant trees at various locations, and I think that's something we'll continue to look.
Like in addition to just the replacement
yes.
trees? Okay.
Well, they're replacement trees, planting whenever there's an addition or construction done to a property. I go out and do a tree review, and if there's no tree or there's room for another tree, I make that part of their condition to have their plans moved along through planning. So we get trees planted that way. There are areas in the city where I'm going to bring to the commission, like Albany Greenway. I see a lot of opportunity to plant trees. There's also a lot of trees that need to be removed along Albany Greenway. So, yeah, there's things like Marin, the Marin Street project, where there's plans for some trees to be replanted, that there were a lot of trees removed. But I'd like to review that, as well as the rest of Marin, to see where there's opportunity to plant more trees. Solano basically replanting trees that have died or need to be removed and replanted. San Pablo, the same. San Pablo, there might be opportunity to add some more trees, but for now, we're basically I'm trying to replace trees. There's a lot of empty spaces where there were trees.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely noticed those, but I'm also wondering, Mark, and I know this sidewalk repair, I don't know what funds, how fungible they are, but I noticed that some areas seemed like somebody's paved over the tree planting strip. Do you know what I mean? It just seems like a very wide expanse of a sidewalk, and it's as if,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a city necessarily, but at some point, somebody filled something in.
Right, you see those throughout the city.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering is it
know-
assumed that it used to be a planting strip? Do we know, or?
I believe so. I believe that sidewalks were created with strips on both sides, because the public right-of-way on record is typically 10 feet from the face of the curb in. So you have a 2-foot planting strip, a 5-foot sidewalk, that means there's a couple more feet. That's considered public right-of-way. And you'll see a lot of properties where they have a fence, then planting, sidewalk, then the curb strip, and then the curb. So I know I've been working with Razoo, looking at a lot of these locations that need sidewalk repair where there's trees. And a lot of my recommendation is, when we repair the sidewalk, let's remove all this, or as much as practical, give the tree some more space to grow. So beyond that, I'm not sure that we can force that. I'd love to, but I don't think we can make property owners open up. But I recommend it whenever I talk to a property owner. I tell them, here's one of the reasons your tree's struggling, or there's sidewalk or whatever. I say, just get rid of that, just take that out.
Isn't that, it is city property, right? Of course you want to work with the property
It's
owner,
not city
but
property.
It's
not?
right away, so it's shared by both.
It's the public right-of-way.
Yeah. That just
okay,
means
but
that
it's,
they can pass through it.
but it's not the property owner's property either, though.
Right, but the property owner is also responsible for the sidewalk and the trees.
Right.
And so it's.
So it's sort of, okay.
Yeah, I don't think we can go in there and say you must plant
Right.
X, Y, Z or whatnot. Just that Razoo is the engineer running the sidewalk program, just so he's also in the Public Works Department. And I think that's one of the things we've looked at when we developed the plans, is to where we can give trees more space. And that's, I think, most of the efforts around that work, so.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Is it appropriate to call for a time check?
Yeah, because it's, I think so too. I agree.
This is fascinating. I could do this all night. but-
Yeah, maybe we can do like phase 2 at some other
Yeah, would
point,
that be
if
all
that's
right? Is
okay,
it-
because
yeah,
we
we're
want
Just a
to.
couple more slides, and
Okay,
just another tree.
there's another, you're on for the next item too, just so you know, John.
I'll go really fast.
Okay.
Recent one where there was a huge root crown, kind of the size of a bathtub or two. That tree was removed, and I'm not sure if it was replanted yet, but that was recent. This is what I do after the posting. I send out requests for proposal from tree contractors for removal and stump grinding. I select the contractor, award the work, requisition a purchase order if it's over $2,500. Contractor schedules the work on their schedule. I can't really tell them I can ask them, but can't make them schedule it at a specific time. I contact the property owner. Usually I do this when they apply for the removal about replacing the tree. So hopefully when we move forward, this will be more obvious with the removal form that they're going to need to replace a tree when a tree is removed. And then the tree planting also gets contracted out, and this week, I think we're finishing up this spring's planting. So I think we've planted about 56 or so trees this spring. So. And then recently the idea of a permit came up, so I kind of threw something together. I don't know if this needs approval or I could use this moving forward or what. It's just a basic, a document to give to the property owner, to give to the tree contractor that's doing the work, or anybody else that might need to have this piece of paper in their hand. It basically states who it's issued to, where the tree is, if it's city initiated, property owner initiated, what the species is, the reason for removal, if it'll be replaced, what species the replacement will be, if not, why it won't be replaced. That's it, pretty basic. I think that's all the information really that we would need on something like that. So I can start using this informally. I don't know if this needs to go through a process to be approved, or I think.
Is that the kind of?
We talk about needing a permit to remove a tree or to prune a tree, but I've never seen an actual document. So.
Is this the kind of thing that would avoid the issue you were talking about last month, where there was a tree that was slated for immediate removal, and then a neighbor was like, why is this tree being removed?
Yeah. The tree company, I think, had no logos on their truck, started cutting a tree, and, neighbor came out and asked questions, and they said, I don't know, John told me to do it, and, so, but yeah. So.
Any other questions? Should we? Okay. So public comments? Okay, I'll bring it back. And any other comments?
I just want to say thank you for that thoughtful and knowledgeable presentation.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Okay, so move on to the next item, which is accepted street tree planting list.
Okay. Should we pull this up?
Oh, you want to put the list up?
I don't know. Do we need this on the screen, or? I don't know.
You have the list. Yeah, we got it.
Probably better.
So
Take my glasses on and off though.
I took the list from the last meeting and tried to make some adjustments to it. I took a couple species off the list, but at the same time, I realized there's a couple other species that could be added and probably should be added, like a big leaf maple, which is a native tree, which could be a street tree. And I wound up with the list maybe the same size as before. I understand the idea of making a list simple, but my feeling is the more diverse of an urban forest we could have, the healthier forest, the better chance in the long term, in the long run, generations down, we have a thriving urban forest. To simplify the list, people are going to pick cherry blossom, half the time, and well, that's one that I wanted to take off the list. But I think I made this list. I put the basic information, starting with whether or not you can plant on the high voltage wires. So if you live on one side of the street or the other, that eliminates some of these trees. Water requirements. If you know your soil is moist, a lot of residents tell me, there's water 3 feet down here. You know that, a tree that's medium water requirement would maybe do okay there. The tree basin size, the planting strip is basically 2, 3, 4 feet wide. I try to, fit these trees into those spaces, whether it's deciduous or evergreen. That's usually a big component of what tree species the property owner chooses. They don't want to rake up leaves in the fall. They want an evergreen tree. And then I added the height, the mature height, supposed mature height and width, crown size of the tree, and a small note, just a kind of a characteristic about the tree. And then there's, if you click on the common name, there's one link with pictures and more description. If you click on the botanical name, there's another link with more description and more pictures of each tree. This is sortable. I'm not sure if I can get this in PDF form where I can sort it, so you can easily sort it by minimum tree basin size and look at all the 2x4s and then look at all the 3x3s. That would help people narrow it down a little bit. And what happens, I get a tree planting permit or application, and I need to go out and review the site and review the species. So often I talk to the property owner, I say, no, you can't plant whatever, a liquid amber or whatever you have power lines, you only have a 2-foot wide tree basin, you know, let's look at maybe an arbutus or something else, and I'll suggest a few different species to them. And I usually kind of work it out with them. And so I know the list is still large, and I made 2 different versions. One version I was my first edit was trying to pull out the trees that are really kind of marginal, experimental, not really, you know, maybe a tree that someone who is really a tree person is familiar with and would be excited to see that tree on the list and want that tree in front of their house. And that turned out to be a very small part of the greater list. So then I decided I'll just split out what's already on the list from what I would like to add to the list, and then I have a small blurb at the end of the few species that I want to take off the list. So
just for clarification, the white is what was already on the list?
that's the current.
The current list,
Yeah.
the pink is the
Those are the new.
potential, newly added, okay.
Yeah. So white, colored or bolded are the new species. So on the first list, the bold ones are added. Does that make sense?
Or bolded, so if they're bolded, they're added also, or?
Well, on the proposed, there's one accepted tree list proposed and one says alternative. So
Okay.
the proposed has added trees in bold in the white section, and then there's just a small pink section with some added trees, and then there's the trees removed section.
Thanks for adding the canopy, that's the height and canopy size, is that right?
Yeah.
Thanks for that, that's really helpful.
So, and that's another determining factor when I talk to the property owner. You know, when I look at the space, I look at what trees are there, where the buildings are situated, and we decide, it can help decide what tree would be best there, the tree that'll fit in that space. And for me, I'm trying to push the largest canopy tree. So, but there's situations where ginkgo is an example. There's tall columnar varieties, and then there's a rounded, broader variety. So if you have a big open space and you want a ginkgo and there's no power lines, big wide one. If you're on a narrow street and have the room in the planting strip to put a ginkgo in, maybe you want a columnar, or if you want 2 trees, maybe you want 2 more columnar-shaped ginkgo trees. We can, we make the decision like that.
Any questions from the commission?
I had one. My understanding was at the last meeting that we were trying to make sure the trees would have the best chance for success so that we don't see them coming back for removal. And so there was some hope that there could be, that there was some ideal set of trees that, wow, these are the ones that really thrive in Albany, and we could have a more concise list for that to recommend. I hear what you're saying about diversity, and that is an important consideration. Is it your sense that all of the ones in white and orange or whatever that color is, should do well if the sizing is correct and the power lines are taken into account and everything.
Yeah, basically, I think I don't know if we talked about an ideal list. It's hard to, there's not really an ideal list. There's not a few trees that are going to do good in every situation. So we wanted a more basic list, like trees that people are familiar with, oak, maple, redwood, or whatever, common trees. And I feel we should get away from that. I feel we should offer more. I should, the YMCA, it's a narrow planting strip. There's the buildings right up against the sidewalk. They were doing remodeling. They removed some Bradford pear trees that were in bad shape. And I suggested the sweet shade tree because it's a beautiful tree and it grows tall and thin. It'll fit that space. So we were able to put 2 in there and then a golden rain tree also in front of that building. But I think, again, all this criteria helps decide whether the tree is ideal for the location. Each situation's different. I was talking with Mark earlier, and he said, trees are supposed to be easy. And I said, no, trees are very complicated because it's nature, it's always different, the situation's always different. It's not an assembly line product that there's an ideal type that will work good for everybody. So I realize this is a large list, and I'm willing to narrow it, cut some trees out if there's good reason to cut.
If I remember, I was one of the ones pushing for a shorter list. But then, when you think about it, if you look at a particular space, say you've got a 2x4 spot, well, that eliminates a lot of them. And then you look at the other, so by the time you get down, you've got 5 trees to look at. So
Yeah,
sure,
I
it's a
agree.
large list, but on the other hand, when you're looking at the specifics, it's actually not so large. There's a lot of variables.
I'll get people apply, especially when it's a planning required tree. They'll apply and they'll say, do I have to choose the species now? And I say, no, just get the application in. I'll let planning know that community development know that you've applied, and then we'll move forward. And when it's time to plant, we'll work out.
And I wouldn't say this is too long. I don't know.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the basic idea is you're assisting them anyway. So it really, I mean, it's never going to be unfiltered, like, here you go. It's going to be kind of curated by you in terms of what's available to them.
Yeah, I sort of approve the tree or reject the tree if they.
And it looks like it's sorted by basin size, is that right? Which kind?
It can be.
Okay.
It's
And a different.
So that was the question. Will this be available as a spreadsheet to the public?
I'm not sure I know. I was trying to work with.
You can't sort a PDF.
PDF.
You can't. It doesn't. I don't think you can do that. But
One option is I could just sort it and PDF all the
public
different.
Google Doc or something that they could get to. I don't know if you can do that so they could sort it but not edit it.
Or I could just
don't know.
leave it as Excel.
Yeah,
But PDF is easier because everybody's.
Sure, it's just not dynamic. I could build you a tree finder.
It's like you're the computer guy.
I could build you a tree finder app.
In the city's website, you can upload Excel documents and Word
Well, there you go.
documents.
That'd probably be
Don't
fine.
usually because not everybody has it, but it will pop up the temporary,
And the PDF would have like a link. Those links would be active, right? Okay.
Yeah. I could have links for, tree list by basin size, by width,
you can do
water requirements, whatever. I could have a few versions of it posted.
Okay.
Yeah, this seems well organized. I think it'll be a great resource.
Yeah.
We can also investigate because we can actually put in a table into the website that might be able to be sorted. We'll have to look and see. Actually put it in, rather than just creating a link that you just click on, you could put the actual table on the web page. So we can investigate and see if that'll work.
So let's say I want to plant a tree that's not on your list. Is that? What's the process for somebody who wants to do that? Is it just not possible once this is published, or is that something that you'll take into consideration?
That's a good question, and I feel that I can take that into consideration. So I think if you suggested a tree, I'd research it if I wasn't familiar with it, and if you feel strongly about it, say, okay, let's do it. Let's
Like if I was like, dogwood's not on your list, but I want that in
Nope,
my front yard.
that's one that should be on the list, I think, yeah. Especially this time of year, I'm seeing them blooming here and there, so. But, yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Do we do public comment?
Public comment.
Public comment? Nope. Thank you.
Please add dogwood to your list.
Any other comments?
You can make the motion with adding it.
Any motions?
I motion to accept the list with the addition of dogwood.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Thanks to this.
Nice job, John. That's
John,
fabulous.
yeah, thank
That's
you.
really fabulous.
Okay, next item is potential measure our funded projects for capital improvement program.
Shouldn't lose them.
I should have brought chocolate. Chocolate at this hour for this. Okay. Okay, so this list has come back to you again, new list. There's a few updates to it since last time we saw each other. I also included the list from 2015, and I just added some check marks next to things we are working on currently that were selected. And you got the video, the link about the National Fitness Campaign. I just provided the information because it is an option to you, so I don't.
So- Go ahead, sorry.
It's not question time yet.
I know. That's why I said go ahead.
So I just put all the information in there. That doesn't mean that you have to select it, but we can talk about it. Obviously, Commissioner Abbott is very excited about one part of it.
I have a question, that's all.
Okay, so let me just give you the few updates that are on here. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
We had we redid an estimate for the bocce courts and removed the path from that estimate. And so that is for 2 courts. They're about 22,000. We changed the approach to it. It's a little more simple, but still a nice idea for it. Still working on the scoreboard information. The additional fencing, we're kind of reaching this, kind of been a long process. The school district, the city originally had said, we will contribute $20,000 to this project. The school district was going to be responsible for the rest of the cost. We had some issues with getting their person to actually give an estimate that Mark, the city engineer, felt comfortable with, because there wasn't any engineering done on some of the poles that would get this increased height. And so it kind of stalled. This is Mark's range, basically, is what, without going out and soliciting official bids for it, he thinks that there's going to need to be some engineering that's going to be looked at in terms of increasing the height, and especially in that center field fencing section, because it's a really, really tall section. So I'm just kind of leaving it there for now. The update from the school district on my next conversation, because I checked in with them, they said that they would only contribute up to $20,000. So that was a change from their original commitment. We still have the turf on there. What for the Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park? That's like phase 2 information. And in order to really know if it's feasible to do it and what's going to be required to get a cost estimate, then we'd have to have a architecture firm do that for us. Mark estimates that's about $10,000 to $15,000 to have that done. I've looked back through all the Pierce Street park planning documents, and it is in the phase 1 through 3. The council approved going through a phased approach to Pierce Street Park. We implemented phase 1, which was basically the grading and what you see out there right now. So I believe, though, they did the grading for a field, and at some point there, what can fit out there is basically an under-9 soccer field. It's about the size, with some outlying areas. Obviously, that would be a rectangle. Mountain bike, we're still working. The guy that's supposed to do the concept has been busy, and then our champion of that project has been out of town, Jim. So in June, we're going to all get together to work on that. National Fitness Campaign is that basic like fitness court. And, the closest one that's to us right now is over in Chrissy Field. That was the first spot, and they put in the new one there. It's a nice fitness court. We've put in our own fitness court. This one has, it comes with an app. It comes with an exercise, so anybody can just show up. It's one of those things about fitness being free and available to everyone. And looking at a couple potential sites just for you to think about. Obviously, this is like a menu. This isn't, you have to do any of these. At the Ocean View entry, she'll just show you a picture of a couple of these spots. while we're here, I'll come back to National Fitness Campaign, because the next one is a big kid swing. This came up a couple times when we took out that big tree where the arrow is in the park, and then Commissioner Sardinas also recommended as well, can we put a swing in this area? So we had our architect people, RDG, who usually does little bits and things for us, look into it, and they did go out and size it. And there's putting in park fitness equipment, you have to have certain clearances, and so they're recommending this swing, which kind of encourages 2 people on it. It's intended for 4-year-olds to about 10-year-old, and the space that it's going in isn't that big, really. The issue with it, as I wrote in here, is that, as you guys know, most of our parks have either top turf or FIBAR when we redo them. And that park in that section has sand. And so I think we would be required to change the sand into like a FIBAR in that section. Top turf is super expensive, but that's something we'd have to consider because we're making a change to the equipment out there. It wouldn't be that terrible. You could still have sand in the smaller kids' side, but that would be the one issue with this. The other one is to consider, is this a Measure R? Is this a playfield? Maybe not necessarily, but maybe we keep it on the list, and if we have funding from a different source. We definitely wanted to do this. This was kind of that exchange for taking away your tree to put something else out there. But we can also investigate if there's other options. I threw out like tire swings, a little an older thing, or at least a solo swing, but something for that older age group. We can also engage the kids if we get a few options to let them choose. You guys decide to do
They're
that.
going to be teenagers by the time
I know, right?
Good luck
You're like,
engaging them.
who wants a swing?
Wi-Fi, they want
Can
Wi-Fi.
you go back to the image, just so I'm not as familiar? So it is right adjacent to the play structure.
Yeah, you see where the arrow is? That tree is no longer there.
Yeah.
It was questionable, and
But the Sandy Park for young kids is back behind it, right? Over
It's
there.
on the
That was
left
where I
side
get
of
my
it.
orientation.
Yeah, it's all in that area.
The picnic tables are what I'm seeing through that.
it's up the steps. Yes, exactly. This is the front of the park.
Okay.
The 2 to 5 is on the left-hand side where the little steps are going up,
Okay.
and this is the 5 to 12.
Okay, so I usually put on the other side. Okay.
And then the last item that's a new one, but Public Works has been working on this because we have a couple of these light sets that are out at the Memorial Park tennis courts, is they did an estimate of looking into changing those lights to LEDs, which I think is a great idea. There's a cost that would be to change all the lights at Memorial Park tennis. Again, not totally sure. Do we consider a tennis court a playfield? I mean, it seems like it is, and lighting is included in that, but I wanted to make sure it made your list. So, so for the national, these were the the site that I was just throwing out there as an idea, is that same kind of area where we were suggesting putting in parking. This is a really interesting spot because we don't have very many unused, just empty. It has some beautiful trees in here, but basically it's storing mulch, and it's sometimes a year we do have sand where you can pick up for sandbags. So it probably wouldn't fit on this front side of it, but it might fit on the parking lot side, kind of in that site. I think you might have to lose one of the redwoods that are in that section, but there are about 4 or 5 in that little corner. And sorry, this is a Google Earth. It wouldn't let me zoom in, so I'll go back to that picture. But if you're interested in that, then we would obviously be looking at that further. This is just the looking at sites. The other one, you said I was looking through, Pier Street Park went through a really long community process in planning what was going to happen out there. So they have a lot of great information from the community members and input. And so I wish I had a pointer to show you, but you can see where the path coming down is. It kind of makes that curve. Where the field would be is the big section, kind of down in the right-hand corner. The other section is you would walk around from the top and walk around a potential where that red square is. It's semi-flat. And exercise park course was actually items that people were interested for that park. And so it's being thrown out there as well. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a National Fitness Campaign item. You could also look at putting in, like we did, a couple of fitness pieces of equipment as well in that spot.
What was the pricing on that?
It's a combination. So they said it's about $120,000 to put in the thing. That's their equipment, all the pieces of it. The part that they give a $30,000 grant on that. And then they asked the city to come up with $45,000, and they helped find local partners to pitch into the other $45,000. And then the city would have to pay for the cement pad that would be put in place.
So that's how you get the 81.
Yes.
But sorry.
And that's how you get the 81. But I guess what I'm asking is what you did on the Albany Greenway, that exercise park, what did that run?
I don't know that that pieced out because it was part of the bigger one, but I can look. Those pieces range between like 5,000 and 7,000, and then you put the surfacing, whatever that is, underneath it. So there's an option too, because it doesn't have to be this way. This way it's a package deal because you get a workout and you can show up with your phone and you're part of it. But you can also do that by just showing up to equipment as well.
Right. It's an interesting idea. I just was wondering, how did it come about? Did they know about this?
They contacted me back in
Yeah.
right after we made some decisions. We didn't really have any money. It was one of those two things, and they started each year they start and they get sponsors that contribute money to them, so they have the grants to hand out to cities. So they want to expand to the East Bay. I don't think they have one on the East Bay yet, but they're putting them in campuses in San Francisco, and then you saw the other locations across the United States.
So we wouldn't have to go asking for or we wouldn't have to secure the grant. They already have it to give to us.
They award the grant if we're interested. If we are going to pursue it and say, yes, we have a location, we want to go for it, and we're making a commitment to that $45,000 on our side, they're paying the $30,000.
Okay.
And they help us, and they work to get those partners to pay for the other $45,000. Because it's 120 minus the $30,000 grant leaves you with $90,000. Our commitment is $45,000. They'll find sponsors, local sponsors, hospitals, other places that they've worked with to come up with the other $45,000. The city pays for the cement pad, which the area is about a 38 by 38 square. That's a square for it. And then installation of the thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying it's not a sure thing. They're grant funding. They had to look into
It is. No, it is. If we say yes, we're in, we get the $30,000.
Okay. Okay.
Obviously, we would have to progress like this is happening, so they know it would be happening.
There's a lot of housing density right by the Pierce Street Park, so I like the idea of offering some sort of exercise opportunity. I'm just I'd be interested to see how the Christie Field space is used. I mean, I saw the video, so thank you for sharing that. But a promotional video is always a little hard to see, how does it actually function on a day-to-day? So I'd be interested just in terms of the cost comparison. It does seem like a very good program, and I like that they bring in local partners as well to try to
Well, it would be, and it's a good point. I've been to the Christie Field years ago, so I don't know if it's this. It's probably been replaced with this. But I mean, that's the question: is how much would it cost us if we just did it without having this whole program? I mean, is this definitely cheaper than just putting in something like that ourselves with just some?
Yeah, it can be. I think that there is a benefit to that being this package about the actual exercises, and that's you can go through this and do a workout. There is a nice part about that. I think. What we're finding at Albany Greenway, we might need to add some maybe tips or exercises you can do on here, or figure out a way to put QR codes or expand that so people have an idea how to get a workout into it. But there are other options if fitness court is the idea and you want to go a different direction. Yeah.
I will say I have walked by there a number of times at different times of day, and I see all different ages of people using it. And then I also saw someone dancing the other morning, like a really talented dancer, just standing next to it, kind of dancing in a cement space near there. So, and there were like 3 people working on the machines that were unrelated to each other. It seemed like. So I think it's very well utilized, and I think there would be interest over here with the number of people living just up the street.
Totally. I mean, if you continue that, we had talked about once we got the fitness court in, if we wanted to expand that in the Greenway, of adding a few different stations along the way, which could be looked at as well. We kind of went with a centralized, because we had a very small budget for the Albany Greenway fitness court. Yeah.
When you pulled out the bocce courts, which thank you for that, because it's great to see what the estimate is. So what was that? I was also kind of interested in the pathway from the University Village out to connect up to the bikeway, just because of the same reason, because of density and because of the number of people that need that.
Yeah.
What was that running?
It was about $15,000. It's an asphalt path. It's not very long. It goes from that back gate, which right now is like a DG. There's a little bit of cement, I think, and then it goes DG. And what it would do is just run right along the back side of the picnic area It would connect into just the walking path currently in the park, but they would add like the arrows and the information, so you'd know that you're connecting in.
So on the more detailed table, I see the 15,000 for the path, that says roughly 25,000 for the bocce, and then it was 7,000 to repair grass, and that's what adds up to about 50,000. Is that the idea?
Repairing the grass, because it was a volleyball, supposed to be a grass volleyball court, that was just an option. Do you just want to repair the grass and keep it as a volleyball court?
Instead of bocce.
Instead of bocce, yes.
So then on the shorter list, it says 50,000 for bocce courts, and on the longer list, it says 25,000. What would you say is the difference there?
One of the differences is that we were going to go with basically like a design build company and use what they put in to put in the bocce courts. And Gail decided we could do this in a different way. Like, we know how to do this. We can get a contractor to build it the way we want it, which can be a little more simple. It doesn't have to be what they had. Also, there was, I think, a bit of maybe some confusion on where that bocce court, when he gave me the estimate, was it going to go in the greenway or in the back of Ocean View? And those sites were a little different, so the demo and the grading cost was lower. This is the updated cost. This is from 2015, and then the shorter list is from last week, the cost.
So the shorter list,
$22,000.
so it costs twice as much because why exactly?
It's 2 courts.
2 rather than 1.
Yeah, the 2 courts. Yeah, sorry. You gotta have 2.
Play.
I have a question about the turf field at Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park. Wondering where that interest came from? Was that city council? I can't remember.
Yes, and it's also in the phased approach that they approved a million years ago, because it's been a long time, but is that would be looked at in the future phases of putting a field out there. And they call it a multi-use field, so it's doesn't necessarily be like specific, but the size that you can get out there is under 9. And then recently, when we went to council for the work plan amendment, there was a request by a council member to add, looking into the feasibility of putting in a turf field there. I think the change there is that looking at it as artificial turf versus putting in grass with irrigation.
And I mean, I'm just curious, because I know the baseball, that was an interest of the baseball. I'm just wondering why we would want to have, I guess it's just a council member, so that's just what we're responding to there. Just curious in terms of like, it seems pretty expensive to just do an analysis for 10 to 15. We can get the bocce ball court for 50.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder like how, I guess it's a motion that we potentially make, but I'm just concerned about spending that much, because then it's almost like we're saying that's what we're going to do.
Yes, and I put it on here as a cost, but I haven't gotten direction whether that cost would come out of our Measure R funds, or it would come out of, is it going to come out of a council unrestricted? So we need to get a determination on if we want to move forward with that analysis, then where is the money coming from? Yes.
Okay.
I can tell you that the cost estimate from back in, so this is like 2014, to put in grass with the irrigation was over $400,000.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know.
Can you point, so is it that section down, like the bottom section?
Yeah.
That's where, yeah, because I sort of remember when we talked about the park plan, it's half the park, and we didn't,
The grassy area, the potential grassy area.
That whole area, and so there were big questions about what it was going to be used for, and, right now, it's just, dirt and grass.
Yeah.
Not even grass, it's
Something.
It's not much, and so it needs something. And so in the plans, it was like a big grassy area where people could, like, we had pictures of people doing Tai Chi, and, all sorts of people came out and said what they wanted to use it for, but the grass was just the second phase, because it needed some surface or some treatment.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for that history,
Definitely,
that
it was
context.
cost that
was in the
started
budget.
eliminating. We had like about $1 million, and things just got.
So there's
over the
no
base.
more funding for that earmarked for period? It
No.
would have to come out of here to do that?
Or some other, yes,
Yeah.
some place in order to put grass out there. It's unfortunate because it doesn't look that great right now. But if, when we start really kind of digging into Peggy Thompson Phase 2, I'm going to pull out all that historical information so you guys can read through it again. There's some fairly nice timelines that have been put together of the project, and then some nice comment information sheets. They had about 4 community meetings a lot of good input that went into the planning. Parks and Rec saw it a few times as well.
Is it appropriate to make motions about one or two particular items, even if we're not ready to move forward on all of the items?
Totally. It's up to you. You don't have to make a motion tonight either, but, Measure R is getting closer.
Can you remind us again?
Yeah,
That
it's
does-
supposed to be September 2019, but I think the key is that we have a plan for the spending. So it doesn't mean that we have to get it done by that time, but we have to show that we're moving towards, we have some things moving.
So then I had a couple other questions. The other one was, on a previous version of this, we had the key route pathway, and if I remember, that was in the $200,000 range. And I don't see it on this list. I know we had a decision not to put it in the other funding, but is that still something that we should or could be considering, or did we move that off with us?
Council requested to move that off. It was the Shrine Pocket Park and
Okay.
the key route. There was some question about whether it would qualify as Measure R because it's more of a passive walking path, not necessarily a recreation playfield. And so that was part of that discussion as well. That doesn't mean that that's going to go away totally, but it may not even be able to use this funding. But that was a request from council. That's kind of what spurred this whole thing, why we suddenly had the money remaining, is because it took off that I think it was about $215,000 for the key route walking path, and then $79 for Shrine Pocket Park.
And then my other question is related to the mountain bike park, which I both personally am interested in and also feel that the Board of Education is interested in. You imagine that by June we'd have some sense. Do we have any ballpark estimate of any idea? Is that a $100,000 project or a $40,000 project or a?
I don't think so. It's mainly dirt coming in, but his guess, was between 40 and 50-ish. He's just been busy, so that's what he's going to be working on in terms of that concept plan that we agreed on, so that we can have an estimate. Now, what we would do with that, because there's the element of not knowing, because that's a Caltrans property, but if you made the recommendation, like, here's what we'd like to do, we're proposing this to council, and council said, yes, move forward, then we start working with Caltrans with basically our business proposal for the property. But they won't do anything with us until we have a full package to present to them.
Will your June meeting be before our June meeting?
Oh, no, I don't have that on the books. Jim should be back, and the man's name is Alex. Said that he's back at the Richmond site, I think, in June.
I have a question. When we consider these eventually, do we need to think about maintenance costs over the long term, or what sort of consideration do we need to take for that?
We kind of always do. With the mountain bike park, that was a question that I was putting to Jim and the high school team. Would they kind of make an MOU with us that they would agree to help with the maintenance and keep it groomed, because they'll be using it a lot. So I think that's something we could work out with them.
I'm also thinking of the bocce courts. Right now it says the volleyball court isn't used and you need to maintain the grass, but there, would you need to spray it so that there's no encroachment of weeds, and kind of what would that look like?
Yeah, I imagine there's some raking and keeping debris off of it. Yeah, so we'll have to look and see what that would be. I'm sure maintenance will let us know.
Go ahead. Do you have a motion to?
I wanted to make a motion, and I don't know if other people feel ready, but I would like to make a motion to move forward with a recommendation around the bocce courts and the $15,000 University Village to Bikeway Trail. Do I need to do them separately?
No, I don't think so. I don't, the one thing about the trail, so I have to look into this one too, because I'm not sure how this matches up with Measure R. But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't necessarily be other funding for it.
So maybe set that one aside then. So I'd like to make a motion to consider moving forward a recommendation around the bocce courts.
I generally support the bocce courts. I'm just a little concerned because I feel like we don't have a lot of information, and this is like a set pot. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe. I think that's fair too. Okay. I know the times, well, I guess September 2019, so we do have another year.
I know that it seems strange because you're like, well, okay, let's just do it. In 2015, this is the list we really went by. And so it doesn't mean like tomorrow we have a bocce. That just means that we start beginning the process of working through it. So if we decided bocce the next step would be, okay, we'd work on getting a design, then we'd work on where's the funding come from, those kind of things. So there is more of a process that happens. If you decide that bocce is the thing, then you become participant in the planning and seeing it through.
We should hear from others if anybody has.
Do you want us to give you kind of individual items, or do you want us to approve a package? These are the
Well,
things.
it doesn't
that
have to be a package, no.
Just whatever, okay, all right.
And you might decide, like, let's just focus on bocce right now, and we'll come back to
Pretty
this
sure I'm not
list
going to
and
decide
odd-
that, but yeah.
For bocce, are there other volleyball courts in Albany?
No, but I can tell you that we have never put a net up.
Because
Hard to
I have a net and I'm planning a
No, you
thing there
Oh, you are?
to play badminton, but so I'd be sad
There are
if it
pools.
disappeared.
There are pools.
No,
And
So
you
you're
know,
the one.
I'm the one.
There's, the other option is you say, no, we want to set this money aside for the potential field that might go in at Pierce Street Park.
And then you're saying that we would need to have our plan by September 2019 to actually say that's what it's going to be used for?
Right, yeah, that's what we're shooting for. That's why you see
In
Albany
process,
Hill.
right, yeah, kind of something moving.
And then also, the sooner we decide, the sooner things can actually happen. And
Yeah,
Well, so maybe we can come up with like a timeline for ourselves to do more digging into like what we want to think about here. And the only thing, I haven't been doing homework in between regarding this measure, but I keep on coming back to like, gosh, it seems like a big pot of money that we just came up with because of the freeing up of the key route. And I don't know that we've done a real process around what do people want, and
I would say that, we started way back in 2015, and we got a fairly good list, but
Okay.
if you start thinking about the actual things you can use it for, it really limits because it's recreation playfield, so you have to
Yeah,
fit that
okay.
definition. So there aren't that many things that really fit that.
Okay, that's helpful.
That's why you
to
don't see
know.
a lot of other like park-related tot turfs or things like that because they're not necessarily recreation playfield.
So if the plan needs to be completed by 2019, or it's 2019 or 2018?
2019.
2019. Then when does, project construction need to be completed, or it doesn't? That's not part of the,
No, I think that we're trying to say, like, we are making substantial moves in order to spend the money. And this is going to come up soon. I think it will fairly soon because they're trying to talk about that new Measure R that they want to put out. So I have to work with Mark to see what his plan is for that presentation. Because the same thing is for Albany Hill. We're not going to finish by then, but we want to get moving and have, okay, here's the design, and we're moving towards that.
I think officially, we're supposed to be done by then. I mean, by the letter,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be done by then, but we're thinking they'll give leeway if
They
we're
will, yeah.
well underway.
And as we're talking about this dog park, it's not, that would not apply here, right? This would not, no? Playfield.
City attorney questioned if that would fit.
Okay.
In terms of play field. You could make cases for it if you.
I think with a few more numbers on here, we might be in a better,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's a lot of work, and I know that it's not you. So it's
Some
not
of
in
it,
your
yeah.
control, yeah.
The additional parking, that we have a temporary transportation planner because we lost Aleda,
Yeah.
and he is working on that for us. He agrees that we can get parking in that area if that's an option. The scoreboard part, I'm going to have someone come out there because we're looking at doing, a wireless digital scoreboard for that. Yeah, some other coming to my mind. But if you kind of add up some of these what the costs we have, we're pretty close to
Yeah.
the amount.
Yeah, well, that's why I'd like to see the other numbers.
Yeah.
I added bocce, the bikeway, the batting cage, the fitness area, mountain bike estimate that you gave, ballpark, and then the lights. And that came up to, just around 200 and change. So that still leaves potentially the fencing and also it leaves the parking, but it's not particularly my passion area.
Yeah.
But I understand that I haven't been dropping off children at that time or picking
Well,
up.
and I would say that with the new rousing bocce leagues we're going to have, we're going to need that additional parking.
It's going to be the first one playing. Gonna be the first.
Well, the other, I'm
By
wondering
the way,
if
I
there's,
support the bocce. I just want that known, but I could still joke.
is there any general estimate we could get for a range for the artificial turf, just to see if it's even in the ballpark of feasibility, or no? They don't want
No,
to commit.
that's what the this study.
That's why they're like 10
It's
to
fairly
15? Okay.
expensive, Yeah, it's fairly expensive.
Okay.
We can get an estimate for what it costs by and large, but we don't know what's going to have to be done to the site.
No, I understand, yeah.
I think that's what the estimate is for.
But like, right. But,
Yeah, that's why I was going through the historical information, because I wanted to know if it was actually graded for the field.
Okay.
Or if it still had remaining grading to do in order to make it a field, and from what I can tell, but I haven't gotten together with Mark
Okay.
on that one.
So, can I make a
Please.
proposal? So, I mean, based on what I've heard, it sounds like the if we approve the items for which we have concrete costs, personally, I would leave out the fencing, because I think that we need to have more discussion with AUSD to understand why they change the amount that they're matching, and like try to figure something else about that, because that's a big difference in cost. But outside that one, I feel like we should approve the items that have concrete costs and move those forward and start. I mean, $315,000 is a lot to work with, and if we can move some of these forward and start making progress, I think that the community would be happy. And then that still leaves us, I mean, it sounds like if we have 200,000, we still have about $115,000 left to work on some of these other issues when estimates come in. So I feel like we should start getting some of these things off our list.
I like that idea.
I like that idea. I did have one other question about the ball field for the district. Who uses that ballpark?
So that's the reason why it's come to us, is that it's because they play high school varsity baseball on that field. And originally it was basically a Little League field. So that change in the size of user and the ability to hit the ball out of the field is where this is coming from. The school district has had a number of claims for balls going through windows, and specifically people in center field. So that's the former city manager. We met with the superintendent, and we were trying to help them solve the problem, but the city felt like there was a liability, number of balls being hit over the fence, or foul balls going down the right field fence. Now at the tennis court, we've always had that issue there with balls being hit into the tennis court to people who are not ready to be hit in the back of the head with a baseball. So that, for us, recreation side is our key side for that, which is the left field.
How was that originally proposed to be funded? Did it just show up here recently, or was it always Measure R that we were expecting?
No, it wasn't. And we've had a change in our city manager at the time, but so when we met with the school district, the city manager said, we're contributing $20,000. She didn't say where that was going to be coming from, so I don't know if she had
no, but the rest of it, I'm wondering if the Park and Rec side, where was the money going to come from?
That was all we were going to put in, was $20,000. The school district was going to pay for the rest of the fence, whatever the cost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so now we've added in the center field part of it.
Oh, I see.
The city was under the impression that the issues were for center field. The school district then came to us and said, no, it's on the right field line. But we've heard from the neighbors, and I've met with those neighbors, that it's the center field fence area that is really a big issue for them. They're the ones with baseballs on their roof.
I'll just say I don't feel comfortable supporting that one yet, just because of that reason. And like, I don't know, I want to spend that much money on a fence when there's other recreation opportunities.
And is the 50,075, is that our portion, or is that, would we subtract the 20,000 from that?
And you subtract 20 from that.
So we're looking at 30 to 40, or 60, or 55, okay.
Yeah.
I do remember the folks coming here and being very concerned, and I can see that as being our issue. That's the city, that's we're protecting this.
We are trying to work, we made this really strong suggestion to the baseball team also to change the way that they're allowing some of that batting practice to take place on the field, which is where I think the majority of those balls are coming from, not necessarily during games.
Well, or even just the fact, like, maybe we should support it, but not necessarily out of these funds, right? Because we don't have money.
Is allowable under Measure R?
No, I guess, if the city really wants to pick up that tab, there's other funds, like general fund or other funds to cover that.
I don't know that part, but yes, you don't have to use Measure R.
You don't have to use these Measure R funds, yeah.
You're making the recommendation.
Okay.
So
we could recommend all the items that have concrete estimates except for the ballpark.
I just want to say, though, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't want to just be like, okay, let's do it because we have a number for it. I want to be a little thoughtful, and if we need one more meeting to be thoughtful, I agree that we should get some moving, but then I could even support maybe one or two that I feel strongly about. Like, I actually am open to the bocce courts and the mountain biking park, but we don't have a number for that. I just don't want to be like, okay, let's do the cement batting cage because we have that 25 there. Let's just do it. I feel like that's a little bit like backwards a little bit. So,
And on the fitness campaign, I support potentially even putting that there, and I definitely support something like that, but I would be interested to just see more options or to go look at that before knowing just to understand more about how it's used.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I would as well.
I would, oh, go ahead.
Well, I guess I would just suggest possibly some sort of prioritization so that in case estimates shift or something, say the mountain bike park comes in a lot higher, but that's something that we really want to support, that we at least know where, when we do make the recommendations to City Council, like how things should kind of fall out.
yeah, so do we feel like we're up for that right now, prioritization as a discussion?
I don't think we're ready yet. I think we need more numbers. We need to.
Okay.
I'm ready to second your motion to approve the bocce ball courts.
That's exciting.
I'm tired of talking about bocce ball courts. Let's do this.
I would say for that one, it did already go through the 2015 process. It was slated to happen, and we did that switcheroo. So there is that part of it. Now, I will say that and I'm not suggesting this, but I want to bring it up, as Commissioner Patterson brought this up about when we start looking at dog areas, that there is a question because you might look at Ocean View as a potential site. I'm not saying that would happen, but it's an obvious thing that they might look at that as, is that even a possibility?
So how many bocce courts can we get in Section B? I guess that's the question.
You can get a lot of the cost wouldn't change if you put the bocce at Ocean View or if you put it at
Pierce. That was a joke.
another location.
It was not serious.
So we had a
Wasn't a funny
motion and we had a second, right? So should we vote now? Does that sound good? All in favor of the bocce courts? All opposed?
That's 4-3.
Yep. So I guess it's passed, right?
Everybody sounds happy about that.
It is.
So what I'll say about the other ones, the reason why you just kind of get this number and not like a beautiful sketch is because those require some spending. And so I just try to do the cheapest route possible, which is to use Public Works to do the estimating.
I just want to make clear too, we were not voting for the asphalt path, correct?
I don't think that would go for Measure R.
Okay. Because I was
If it is
not
a
I was not voting for the asphalt path, so I just
We
want to
can,
make clear.
we can leave that on the list, because if it is a priority for the commission, and it may not be Measure R funding, then let's take a look at that, because while doing that site, like clearing and grading it, that would be the time to add the path in. So we might be able to look at a different fund for that.
Can I just ask about the turf field? Because I note that under-9s that go to soccer games often come with cars full of gear and other children and people. What is the parking thought about putting a turf field there when there's very limited parking in that area?
Yeah, that was brought up a lot in the community discussion about where parking is. And I don't know if from what the community members were suggesting about the field, they wanted to just be open, multi-use, that you could run, fly a kite. You could actually go out there and play soccer if you wanted to, but it wasn't necessarily going to be like a game field. But you were going to want to revisit that when we really dig into that.
Is that also a place where dogs could run around? Because it is down an embankment and there's fencing and it's sort of
There is
enclosed.
fencing there, and then there's like a storm drain, like a little dip in that section, and there'll be a future bike path that will run along that metal fence, kind of along the freeway, that will connect that the bike trail, the Bay Area. I'm probably saying the wrong one. There's a bike trail that is a connector piece for it.
But not if it's artificial turf. No dogs on artificial turf.
Interesting question because yeah, if you put turf out there, Dogs can be in parks.
I don't know if I can, I don't want to change my motion, but I'm just wondering, I just want to say that if this estimate comes up to be much higher, like, oh,
one?
the bocce court, like, oh, it's actually
You only approved for
250,000.
It's not going to be 250.
Okay, no, I know, but
okay.
even if it's like 100,000 more, I'm just, or 100,000 instead, are we beholden to the vote based on? I'm
We're
just
recommending to council. We're not
Okay.
deciding anything.
Okay, good, okay, thank you. And we're right, and this goes to the next council meeting as a recommendation, is that right? For,
It doesn't have to move that fast, no.
all right.
Let's see if we can get the design looked at, kind of
Does
get.
anybody, okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I also just want to, I mean, to be making a lot of motions, but I also am very interested in the tennis courts, not only because I think that is a play field, but also because that has an environmental and green component, and it's a relatively low dollar amount, seems to have a fairly high net in terms of environmental and cost. So I'm going to just go out on a limb here and see if others are interested in that and make a motion that we consider moving that forward to a planning stage.
You have a second?
If there's not,
I'd second it.
Well, are you seconding, or you said you
I
would?
will second it.
Okay.
I don't think, I mean, I actually like that one too, but I feel uncomfortable with, it. Yeah, I just feel like there's so much to discuss. There's so many other items that I feel like it's not, again, I don't want to rush the process just because we, you know,
is there a sense that we need more community input, like in terms of, we can get all the cost estimates on the paper, but like, is there research that people should be doing between now and the June meeting to learn more about some of these things, or just so that I want to make sure I'm prepared for the discussion, but also that if there's going to be community input, or what that would look like, or where.
It happens here at the commission meeting, so trying to think of a project we had where.
We've had let's see, so we've done improvements to the tennis courts twice.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of people come and speak in support of the tennis courts. They're full almost all the time. And so they, I mean, I don't think we ever had anybody come and say they didn't want us to improve the courts.
Oh, no, I just mean about all
Other ones.
I mean, in terms of all the ideas, like if there's.
What?
it's a good idea.
I'm trying to think of a new project like from the list, but, the parklet was a project, wasn't Measure R, but, it was an item. Even Albany Greenwell, although it had a process that started, once you say, yes, this is where we're going to go, then you're going to say, let's get someone to design that. That's going to come to you. We let people know, and they usually come and make comments and tell us what they feel. They look at the design. You get cost estimates, and then.
But I think Commissioner Patterson was talking about like the public process to engage in this prioritization, like what does the public want according to these different various options? Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I personally feel like there's some obligation that we have to the public to do that too. I don't know how, maybe we post signs at parks that say, we're going to have this discussion, July meeting or something when we have more information.
I feel like, I mean, I guess I feel like, so I've been on the commission for 8 years, and I feel like that they're the groups of people that have come, the park course people came again and again and again, and, they voiced their opinion, and the soccer people came, and the ballpark people have come, and.
Related
so-
to this too?
Well, I mean,
Some
related
of
to
it, yeah.
specific improvements that they've wanted in their areas, and so, I mean, I feel like these reflect that work. Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like this sort of all has come together over the years to, now that we have funding, that this list has come together, and maybe it sounded like when I was saying we should just go forward with these, like, to me, it feels like I've heard from people over the years that these are the types of improvements they want, and now that we actually have funding, I would love to actually see them happen.
Thank you for saying, that's exactly right. Because the old list, you'll see at the top, this seems kind of crazy, but what we try to do is connect it to either a master plan or a Friends of Albany Parks gala where we get information or input from community members. Some came from staff, and things come from the community. So we didn't have a big, long process about wanting to redo the Memorial Park bathrooms because we heard enough from the community over the years that was an item. Bocce has been brought up in various community meetings as a want. Senior Center, we had it in Albany Greenway discussions. And so there's these other things that have happened that have elicited some of that community input. Friends of Albany Parks was a lot of great because we visit every single park and talk to the neighbors that are there, and they give us suggestions. So you'll see some of those come up. Dartmouth Tot Lot, those were collected over Friends of Albany Parks items. The expansion of the Memorial Park sand area. Again, it's from comments through park galas and park cleanups were the main ones, or we have a preschool that was out there. So we're constantly getting input, believe it or not. But, and other ones, bocce, I think it is listed in the master plan as an option for the Ohlone Greenway is where it probably started and didn't go in there. The batting cage is from the field users that use that, and we have issues with maintenance on that side. The court lighting, we have 2 lights that are out, so nighttime use at the tennis courts is the issue. So we can replace them with the regular ones, which is a cost, or we could update them all at one time. That's where I came from, maintenance.
And something like the National Fitness Campaign, I like the idea of the free usage of exercise equipment like there is on the Greenway, but I'm not necessarily sold on that particular thing. And as the people have mentioned tonight, you know, how much did the things that were put in on the Greenway, I think, look tastefully done, and there seems like there's some engagement there from what people are saying. It's not clear to me that the total cost would necessarily of the National Fitness Campaign thing is competitive with that. I don't know, and it looks to me personally a little garish with the blue and everything, and which shouldn't necessarily mean much really, but and there's some more exploration of that would be good.
And the big kid swing was from the tree situation that we had, and we had our junior. We used to have a junior Terrace Park Ranger group that came, and then we had all the kids that spoke at the meeting about losing the tree. So that's where replacement of the swing came from. Sorry, I haven't been explaining it.
It was really hard.
I bet. Well, that's actually really helpful context, so thank you. I mean, I think still, maybe because there's other questions about the new items that have come up, if we can talk about, I don't know, how does
That's
the commission
fine, that's
feel?
totally fine.
I think it may be appropriate to have another meeting where we invite the public in for feedback. Don't expect a lot of people to show up, but I
at least make it
do
a
want to
invitation.
mention September 2019 sounds like a long way away, but it's really coming fast. So I don't want to delay too much, especially with the history of we've been over it a lot. So I would say maybe could we have at the next meeting have people come in or have it an agenda item, and I mean, I would want to move it pretty quick.
That's totally fine, and I think that if we maybe clump the Pierce Street Park items in together, like,
We might get more people.
yeah, let's look through the historical information, pull up those comments again, and say, are you interested in this happening? You know, invite people. That's a pretty strong group, and then also get their input on that turf. They may not even want artificial turf; they may want natural grass. You know, that's the other. Part of it. So anything happening in that park, there's a pretty strong neighborhood group that have gone through that process.
Great.
Could you share the phase 2 and 3 versions of that park? Because I don't know if I may have gotten that in my orientation, so I apologize if I did.
No,
But
I
I'd love
really
to
find
see
it.
what it's supposed to include, like.
Yeah.
And I thought I may have misunderstood, but I thought last time there was some discussion that the mountain bike park could be under the freeway, but it could also be on that other side. Am I?
The preferred location for the mountain bike people, and mountain bike people you know about because he's come to a few of our meetings, and then you guys put it on your work plan, so that's why that's an item on here. It's the area that I'm calling Lower Pierce Street Park on Cleveland. That's the property that they're interested in, not the one on the way out of the freeway that's going to go across from the new park and ride. So not the Buchanan site.
Right, but isn't that where the turf field is?
No, it's low. The turf field is up high, up on
Oh, okay.
Goes where
kind of
it goes
between
down,
Pierce and
yeah.
Cleveland.
So maybe if this is on our agenda item, maybe we can also contact the ballpark people so you guys get a chance to hear from them, because they have come out many times.
About the fencing, you mean? Or?
About the fencing, about the cage. They may talk about the parking. I think that they're an active group that's visited us many times and would be happy to see these on the list.
Okay, is there any other question or comment? So I think, so then the goal is to have a public invite for either one of the next couple meetings, and then discuss more. Okay, so next item, I just wanted to quickly, yep.
Yeah, we had a second, so, and
we have
then
a
we
second?
were
Oh,
discussing.
Yeah, okay, sorry, you're right. The first,
You know what, I would tell you this, that I put it on here for Measure R because I don't necessarily have $18,000, but this would just normally be a maintenance thing that we would say, yes, replace those lights, it makes sense. I put it on here as an option because I think it could use the funds, so that's why it's on here.
Meaning that we
So
could have the
amount of
funds somewhere
thought you
else?
should- This seems like, to me, seems like a slam dunk because it saves so much electricity, and we have 2 that are out, and we need to replace them, so now is kind of that time.
Do we want to vote? So we have the, we have to vote. Okay. All in favor? 1, 2,
How many is that?
After what
3,
you just said, I don't know.
4?
That's a good idea. I don't know.
Okay, so it looks like 1, 2,
It makes sense. It's a good idea.
it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Everybody's suffering.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I'm undecided. I feel like I chose too quickly last time. So Gino, well, sorry.
I'm no.
Who votes no?
I vote no.
I abstain. So I'm not sure.
Fine.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So next item,
Well, that was 6 and 1 then?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
someone, yep.
Can we hold this over for, I make a motion?
Yeah, I would
In the next
second that
meeting?
very strongly, as strongly as I can muster at this hour, anyway.
I know it's pretty long. I'll tell you this, that
Can't see this thing.
prioritization is going to happen because you're going to have Albany Hill access stuff coming to June, and we're also going to have more Measure R coming.
So maybe we can put this on the July agenda, the work plan.
I'm just saying, in terms of prioritizing, you're going to get some automatic prioritization.
Sure.
Because Albany Hill is going to come to you, and that's going to be.
In June. Okay, good to know. Okay, thanks. Okay, meeting adjourned.
Are these for us to